All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. As we're going through, if you can't hear me, by all means let me know. Usually we don't have that problem. We're filming tonight on NCM so that we can rebroadcast tonight's budget presentation. We actually have 4 of these sessions scheduled. Tonight we're doing a fiscal overview, what I would call the town hall departments, which tend to be a lot of the smaller departments in town hall, except the Board of Health. And then we're also going to do the Department of Public Works, the airport, as well as the fire department. Next Thursday, or this coming Thursday, we'll have the rest of the general government departments. So that's the light department, the police department, recreation, senior center, and the library, as well as the Board of Health. Next Monday, we'll have the capital improvement plan. We'll spend a minute going through that. And then next Wednesday, the school committee will hold their budget presentation as well as their sort of formal budget hearing. Next year, we intend to do these sessions a little bit earlier this year, but we have a couple of challenges that we'll talk about this year, not just the override schedule, but as well a conversion in our accounting software that is sort of delaying the process and pushing everything to the end. So next year, we may do in 4 nights what we can do in 2, but we'll have to remain to be seen. The goal is not to rush through it, but to give folks a chance to ask questions about the different budgets, ask questions from the department heads, and hopefully go into town meeting informed, ready to make decisions, and ready to have a good, high-quality debate. As I mentioned, NCM is filming. We have a small enough audience that I can probably take questions throughout the presentation, as will department heads. If we do start getting too many questions, we may just hold them to the end so that we can make sure we get through the presentation, and there'll be plenty of time to ask questions at the end. So we're going to go ahead and get started with an overview. In total, the town budget this year, it's about a $196 million budget. Sometimes you'll see that number reflected differently in different documents depending on what we're looking at, whether it's the budget or what we call our tax recap sheet. But if you look in total, the town of Norwood, we need to raise about $196 million this year to cover the town's operating costs. And that includes general government, which when we say general government, for anyone who's a new town meeting member, that's sort of the town departments, if you will. That's the Department of Public Works, everything at Town Hall, the Recreation Center, the Senior Center, the library. The light department and water and sewer are considered utilities, as is broadband, so those are our utilities, and then the school department. So we have probably, count the school department as one department, probably 25 to 30 departments across everything, but general government makes up about 22 to 25 of them, and then the school department is one, and utilities, it's really just the light department, but it's the light department and the broadband division. And then shared costs are, really, we use the term shared costs, they're really fixed costs, so they're things like our pension obligation, our health insurance costs, and our debt service. And the reason that we call them shared or fixed costs is they're getting paid one way or another every year, no matter what. So we're going to go over our revenues mainly to start. So we're going to talk about local receipts, which is some of the local dollars that the town is able to raise. We're going to talk about our utility receipts, state aid, tax levy, and new growth. Then we're going to go over some of what we call our major fund balances, our free cash, our stabilization, the pension fund, and OPEB, which is our retiree healthcare fund, which is major in its impact, but small in the actual dollars that are in there. So there have been a couple of changes from FY19, and some of these have led to these presentations being a little bit later in the year than we would have liked to have been. The first one is, those of you who have been town meeting members before, you will see a different format for the line item budget. So the actual budget that lists a line and then a dollar amount is going to look a little bit different. We've tried to keep it as close to the old budget as possible, and I actually believe with the school department budget, we're including both sort of the old format and the new format because we haven't completely transitioned those numbers over yet. And that's a result of our change in accounting system. But it's a little bit more complex than just a software change. Most of you will remember last year we appropriated $1.7 million to change our accounting system to a modern system from our 30-year-old sort of legacy system that was built in-house that served us well for many years, but really is a system designed for a different time. So as a result of converting the software over, the format look changes, the picture changes, some of the account names and numbers changes, but there's a separate change that's going on as well. We were on what was known as the statutory accounting system, so that's the Commonwealth's old accounting system. We were on the last count, and certainly the last town our size to still be on the statutory accounting system. We now are going to be complying with what's known as the UMAS system, or the Uniform Massachusetts Accounting System. So that's the same accounting system that applies to every city and town in the Commonwealth that the state of Massachusetts sort of makes us follow, except if you haven't converted to it, you're allowed to use your old system. But when you do convert over, you do need to convert. So that changes some of the account titles, it changes some of the account codes that we use. We may have been calling a line uniform equipment for 30 years, and their line might be uniform services, and you got to sort of make the change. You have some discretion about what you want to call certain things, but what it's led to is an awful lot of manual data entry this year with the budget process. So we had to do our budget, Then we have the question of the override. Then we have to convert our budget from the old system into the new system. And then we have to maintain everything in both systems, the legacy system and the onboarding system, at the same time. So there's an immense complexity to this year's budget that has led to quite a few hairs falling out from quite a few heads, as well as quite a few gray hairs going to quite a few heads to make it happen. The benefit, once we're through it, and incidentally, converting your accounting software over, it's kind of like remodeling your kitchen. In a couple of years, when you're sitting in your brand new kitchen, you're going to be so happy that you did it. But when you go in the kitchen in the morning and you don't have a table and the sink's not working and you can't find where the stove is and you pull the wrong plug over here and now the outlet turns on the blender when it's supposed to turn on the coffee maker, it's a little bit of a nightmare while you're going through it, but we'll be in a better place in a couple of years. There's two areas in particular we will be. One of them is with the school financial reporting. So what happens now at the end of every year, the school finance staff have to spend, sometimes it's a month of somebody's time, taking all of our budget information and manually translating it to the way the state wants to see it. DESE, which is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, has a specific reporting format that they need information in. So we may say, hey, teacher salaries, it's $5 million, and they say, no, you need to break it out this way. So there's an awful lot of manual work that gets done at the end of the year that really kills an enormous amount of staff time, as well as our auditors' time. That will eventually go away with the new format because we will be budgeting the same way the state wants to see the numbers. That's why sometimes if you go onto the Commonwealth's website, whether it's the DESE website or the Department of Revenue website, it's sometimes tough to pull information about Norwood. You'll sort of pull something out and you'll say, well, I want to compare Norwood to this town, and the numbers just don't remotely make sense. It's because we just have a very different reporting system, really the older system where we built it on our own when the town still did that. So our numbers don't always match up because then we're manually going in and saying, geez, this number is, we call it this, but the state calls it this, how do we move it over? So that process has been very complex, but it'll be very good and it'll make the school department's lives a lot easier in terms of their reporting and their end-of-year accounting. We on the town side as well actually pay our auditors, just as the school department does in certain cases, to prepare certain reports for the state because it's just too much time and energy and effort of the staff to take a month or 2 months or 3 months to convert everything we do in our system to what the state wants to see. That will eventually all go away and make our lives a lot easier. The light department's the third area where that happens. We have to meet standards set by the Department of Public Utilities. We have to meet the Uniform Massachusetts Accounting System rules. Our light department is managed a little differently than the other 40 light departments in Massachusetts, but we also have the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, who we have to report to as well. So you're trying to take, the town of Norwood calls it A, they call it B, we've got to make sure A goes to B, and then B goes to C. So we've converted our account codes on the light department side, again, to a lot of sort of tailoring to match up with these FERC codes that we have to do anyway. Over time, this saves us money, it saves us a lot of staff time. We actually saw our audit come in almost, our bid for our audit come in at roughly the same dollar amount as it did for the last few years, because our auditor said, hey, normally we go up in the price, but there's a lot of things we're not going to do for you anymore. So even though a $10,000 savings on a $1.7 million software package isn't substantial, we're already starting to see some of the small benefits of converting over our accounting software. As a result, it's made this year's budget a little bit more complex than it normally is. We're also moving towards what we're calling enterprise-like accounting practices for our utility funds. And what we're really doing is sort of truing up our enterprise funds, or our utility funds, the water, the sewer, the light, and the broadband, making sure they're covering the full cost of the service that they're providing. Because when you pay that water bill or that broadband bill or that electric bill, the cost of providing that service has to be borne by that utility as opposed to the taxpayer, the property taxpayer. There's pluses and minuses to the system that we use. We don't want to completely change it. That's why we invented the term enterprise-like accounting, where we want to make sure that we're getting the full benefit and that the utilities are paying their full cost, but that the town still reaps the benefit. As I said, we reap a financial benefit from our light department that no other community in the Commonwealth does. The way we're structured with water and sewer, if we have a surplus in water and sewer, that becomes free cash for the town, whereas in most other towns that's retained in an enterprise fund. And there's pluses and minuses to doing it that way. The town generates $700,000 or $800,000 a year in profit from Norwood Broadband. 100% of that goes into the town's coffers as free cash. If we were to fully practice enterprise fund accounting, that would stay with the broadband. We don't want to do that. We kind of like getting the profit from it. And the light department as well. So we're moving towards that. You'll see that in the next several budget cycles, as well as every year we sort of identify some costs and we shift them over. We may shift some costs back. There's a couple of changes in this year's budget, but we got to make sure we're doing it in a way that's regulatorily correct, in a way that the Department of Public Utilities won't get mad at us, and also in a way that balances out our rates, because we don't want to do is one of two things. One, where we say we'll take this cost over here and we put it over here, and you're just going to jack up the rates. Or we don't want to say, hey, great, we've taken $100,000 from here, we've put it over here, but we're losing $100,000 in revenue over here, so what have we done is just play some accounting games that yield no benefit. But the goal is to make sure that we're fully funding any of our utility-like services from our utility tax costs, or our utility bill costs. So, in terms of total revenue for the town, this is how our pie sort of breaks out. And it's a little difficult to look at because utility receipts, you'll notice, are a huge portion of our revenues. They're also a huge portion of our costs. And as I said, our utility receipts have to cover our utility costs. But it's a huge portion of the pie. Property taxes make up the majority of the other revenue, other than utilities. You'll notice that property taxes are about $78 million. Utility receipts around $87 million. That's common in any community. Every community in the Commonwealth, your property tax is always your largest revenue stream. Because of the way we show our enterprise funds or our utility funds, it doesn't show us the case here, but in terms of funding local services, it's always your property tax that's your largest revenue stream. Next up, we have departmental receipts, which we're going to go through as our next big revenue stream, and then state aid. Everything else kind of comes in as a real small, you'll notice we have an $8,000 transfer receipt, some cemetery revenues. This is a school, this is really a reimbursement for a grant program that pays for our health insurance for certain employees on that grant program. When we receive a grant to pay for staff members, it's supposed to cover their full cost of their pension, the cost of their health insurance, as well as their salaries. So that's just, we treat it as a receivable rather than booking the cost differently. And then this right here is actually the water meter fee. So this is another thing that we do that's a little unique in Norwood, where it's a water meter fee that gets transferred to the general fund. So we call it the general fund, or our main dollar account. And we treat it as a revenue, and then it gets split according to our revenue sharing formula between general government and the schools. So we could move that over and truly practice full enterprise fund accounting, and that would be great. The water department will get the benefit of that additional $670,000 revenue each year. The problem? The town and the schools would lose $670,000 in revenue each year. So there's some things we do that, maybe you could do them differently, but we got to take a step back and say, until we find another solution, we should probably keep doing it the way we're doing it. Because at the end of the day, it does benefit the community as a whole. So local receipts at $15 million is a relatively small revenue stream overall, but it's one of the ones that tends to fluctuate the most throughout a given year. And when we say local receipts, or sometimes we refer to them as, call them departmental receipts. You'll notice the big number there is the excise tax on vehicles. The meals and rooms tax generates quite a bit of money. That pilot payment is actually from the light department. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about how much money the light department generates for the town. Ambulance receipts is another big one, $1.4 million. That's been going up over time. I was meeting in DC last year with actually our FERC lawyers, and our main attorney that we work with happened to bring a couple of his younger attorneys there, and one of them was floored to find out that we actually charge for ambulance services. He said, I never thought that towns would charge for ambulance services. And I said, did you think you called the ambulance and it was free? And he goes, he never conceived of that. So for anyone who didn't know that, when you do call the ambulance, your insurance does get charged. We have limits set on Medicare and Medicaid or Mass Health on what we can charge. Private insurance does pay better. But at the end of the day, it is a substantial revenue stream for the town, almost $1.5 million. Year-round cemetery brings revenue, as does the recreation department. General government is a lot of our lease numbers, and we have a lot of facility leases. We get about $100,000 a year for leasing cell phone tower space on top of the water tower. The OCC building, we get, I think, about a $70,000 lease a year for that. A couple other leases that we have are thrown into that general government number. The health department brings in some money. Licensing fees, a lot of those are the liquor licenses that you charge, as well as other licenses that the town issues. Investments is just our income on investments. That's really our stabilization account more than anything, but that's the money we generate just by happening to have money in the bank, just as everyone else does. Medicaid is some reimbursements we do get for various Medicaid programs through the school department and through general government. Some of that is actually going away as a revenue stream. And last but not least, this NSTAR number is a payment we receive as part of a retransmission contract with NSTAR. That's again something that the light department, and when we get into that, I can explain that a little bit more, actually generates. So when you look at our revenues in terms of our utility receipts, you'll notice that it's mainly the light department, a little bit of water and sewer, and a little bit of broadband. So the way that our utility functions benefit the town, other than the great service that we get through our water and our sewer and our broadband and our light, the light department generates about $5.8 million a year in revenue for the town, directly. That number can fluctuate. It's based on the value of the plant. If the light department has a really good year and their numbers are over projected, that tends to flow back to the town as well, depending on how their numbers go out. But that $1.1 million pilot payment, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, because if we didn't have our own municipal electric utility, we would be taxing some of that, the light pole equipment, just like we would with a private company. So there's that pilot agreement, there's that $1.8 million retransmission agreement, as well as about a $4 million profit stream that comes to the town. We're unique in municipal light departments in how we do that, but it's about $5.8 million a year directly that we get, in addition to the light department covering their operating costs. Water and sewer, we raise about $1.2 million a year. That covers what we call the indirect, so that's the cost of the staff that provide the water and sewer, that's the cost of the DPW for their oversight of it, some of the other legal and HR related costs. That's built into the rate structure, that comes in as a utility revenue. And the water and sewer function as well, if it has a good year, and in theory it should always generate more money than it costs, otherwise it's coming out of our free cash, it will actually generate free cash. We did have a tough year with water rates last year. How wet or dry a season is depends on how much people water their lawns. It's kind of a catch-22. We want to be sustainable with the amount of water we use, but the town makes money when we want to use water, so it's a catch-22. If we break even, we'll be fine. But this is another unique thing that Norwood does that actually generates revenue for the town. It doesn't stay within the water and sewer fund. And the majority of our water and sewer costs are actually just in our purchase of water from the MWRA and our transmit of sewer to the MWRA. And last but not least, broadband transmits between $800,000 and $900,000 in profitability a year to the town. So the broadband unit is designed to profit, and it does profit every year. That comes through as free cash every year, what their profits are. We could look at trying to book that as a revenue down the road, but it creates some regulatory issues, and because it's such a market-based item, I'd be very hesitant to try to book a revenue for it, because we don't know where it's actually going to end up going. I also think it's one of the only reasons we're still generating a positive amount of free cash in any given year. But the establishment of our enterprise funds, the way we've done it, has been beneficial to the town over the years. We don't want to mess with that beneficial. We just want to make sure we're keeping them current. Yep.
Do we know what our penetration rate is for our broadband into the customer base?
We are the single largest subscriber in Norwood. So it's us, and then it's Comcast, and it's Verizon. We have about a third in the market. We're maybe 35%, and they're sort of 33 and 31%. Verizon second, and Comcast is third. Okay. We're first, which is what's most important to know. Yeah, question back here?
So, Mr. Zuko, the profit for the light, or the projected money that's given to the town, is that the entire profit from the light department, or is there a percentage that's kept for the light department for capital and infrastructure improvements?
So yes and no. That's the entire profit. So the profit's about $4 million, $3.84 million or so, and then the town generates the pilot. The pilot's not a profit for the light department.
The pilot, the CAC agreement, which is the current commission system.
Okay, so
it's only for part of the system.
yeah. So, but the 8% of plant number that we're able to generate for profit, 100% goes to the town. The light department does raise its own money to cover its capital costs. We have to fully fund depreciation, so the decrease in the value of the plant we have to fully fund. You can't transfer that to the town. We're regulatorily required to do that. They only do it for light utilities. The way it was set up years ago, it should have been done for water and sewer utilities as well. Nobody's ever chosen to do it that way, but we basically grab everything we can grab from the light department in a legitimate way.
So that's the max that we could potentially take.
Correct. So it's based on the value of the light department's plant. So it's the value of all the equipment and assets that the light department owns. And that's statutorily required. I know that sounds a little funky. We didn't just one day decide, well, hey, how much money should the light department make? I don't know, 8% of plant sounds good. That's what we're allowed to make as a maximum. We could, in theory, go over that if we had a really good year and the state wouldn't come in and slap your hand, as long as you're not intentionally making over that in a given year. It is always a guess every year as to what it is. If you take your plant value and we say, well, as a result, we're going to set the rates to generate $4 million in revenue. We have good usage in a year, or a new business moves in that we didn't project in, and they're using light electricity. We could have a good year where we do above that. And as long as it's not obvious that you're intentionally doing that, you're okay to go forward. But we maximize that out. We're the only municipal light plant that really does that, though. At least in Massachusetts. John?
I'm thinking there might be some value down the road to having a data display that shows not only the receipts from different areas, but the costs associated with it. So that if you start doing what-if analysis, you have all the parts that you need in front of you. You mentioned the costs and that they're not included here. It would be useful, I think,
So some of that is in the light department budget, and some of that's in the budget book that we present to town meeting.
It's in there, it's along with everything else in each department. I'm suggesting there may be some value in having something that is just that.
Sure. Each year we're trying to reform the budget document as a whole. What we're trying to comply with is the Government Finance Officers Association's best practices for budget presentation. So every year there's more data that we want to put into the budget, and we're going to get to that point where we're going to have to reformat the whole document, not the line item budget per se, but all the additional information that goes along with it to make sure that we're presenting as much information as we can.
If I can go back one or two slides. Maybe before that. Yeah, there we go. You were explaining how you've got reporting in 3 different entities for the school department budget. Now, as I would see it from a computer point of view, you'd like to have a database that has all the detail that any one of these needs. And so you could write a script that groups it in order to generate 3 different reports. No human hands need to touch it.
That's what we're moving towards. And part of it is, it's not that we had to generate multiple reports, it's just we generated data this way, and the state wanted it this way.
Right.
So we were doing sort of that manual crosswalk, or we're doing that manual, IT could in theory write a program to do it, but we're spending a lot of time and energy writing a program to do that with the current system when everyone else has a system that just does it automatically. So instead of all of our revenues and our expenses coming in this way, and then we're doing all that translation, our new system will automatically, it's not that it'll actually do it for us, that's just how the information will come in and go out. So just closing, as I said, broadband does generate a profit every year to the town, as well as offering great internet service. I hope everyone here is a broadband customer. State aid is another critical revenue source that the town has. This is money we get from the Commonwealth through 2 different forms mainly. There's a number of subsets, and anyone who goes to the Municipal Finance 101 we're doing in a couple of weeks, we go into more detail about all the different little areas of state aid. But there's what we call UGGA, which is unrestricted general government aid, and that's supposed to be lottery receipts, because those of you who were involved in government when the lottery came into Massachusetts, it was supposed to solve all of our problems, and we'd never have an issue funding government or anything again. That didn't really happen. Even though lottery receipts are still positive, the Commonwealth generates about $1 billion a year in lottery receipts. It doesn't actually solve all of our problems. The other item is Chapter 70, which is state aid for education. That came about as a result of a lawsuit in the early 1990s where the state was sued because it constitutionally requires education. We're required to provide a certain type of education. The state wasn't kicking in enough money on its side to do that. A lot of other states refer to it as revenue sharing. We all know that everyone pays the property tax, but remember that you pay a sales tax and you pay an income tax to the Commonwealth as well. So not all of that money should go to the state. Some of that should come back to the cities and towns, and it does. I will say the Baker administration has been very positive to cities and towns with the amount of revenue that they're willing to share, and state revenues have increased. They've been willing to increase state aid by that same amount. He's yet to say what would happen if state revenues went down, but let's hope that day never actually comes. So we're at about $13 million. That shows about $11.5 million. I should put the number up there in state aid. And I'll explain why that number is different than what we show in the budget book. We've gone up about $2.4 million over the last 4 years. About half of that is this year. The Commonwealth is starting to finally make adjustments to the education funding formula. The problem is that the funding formula developed in the early 90s, used cost centers developed in the early 90s, which were probably realistically left over from the late 80s. It's just not relevant anymore. I mean, they had a formula that projected health insurance would grow at 2 or 2.5% a year. It's never really grown at 2 or 2.5% a year. We've actually been lucky with less than 5 on average the last half a dozen years. Some towns it's not uncommon for it to go up 7, 8, 9%, or have a 12% increase in a given year. So a formula that's based on your health insurance is only going to go up 2.5% a year just isn't realistic. They also assign costs for things like administration per student and facilities per student that were all based on models back then, and that's unfortunately changed. The states changed their requirements, they've changed the mandatory regulations, they haven't gone ahead and actually changed the formula. They're starting to do that now. The other side of state aid, unfortunately, though, is state charges. So even though our aid's gone up about $2.4 million in 4 years, again, most of that this year, what the state charges or takes back out of that aid has gone up about $500,000 in that same period of time. So the state gives us aid. I always like to say the Commonwealth give it and the Commonwealth take it away. They give us a certain amount of aid, but then they charge us for certain things. So we get charged for, as an example, we're part of the mosquito control district. And some of these things are just a way that the state can make sure that the cities and towns are paying for these things If one person opts out of the mosquito control district, you can't do your mosquito control, it doesn't work. We pay for the county through that. That comes as a charge back because it's you get the benefit of having county government, but we're also going to make you pay for it. So we pay for that. One of the largest charges in our total state aid actually comes from the MBTA. And most people don't realize this, but every community that's in the MBTA service area actually takes a charge against their state aid for the presumed benefit of having the MBTA in your community, that it brings economic development, it brings residents, it brings high income earners who are commuting into Boston. So we actually take a charge against our state aid of about $600,000 for the privilege of hosting the MBTA here in Norwood. That number is statutorily set by a formula. I don't know the exact formula. It's based on population and traffic and transit and all these other numbers that the state makes up, and we just assume that they're doing it right. Again, not unique to Norwood, it's every community in the MBTA service area, but when you hear about the MBTA looking to raise fares, and everyone raises their arms and say, how dare you raise fares, my thought is, well, but you're also charging the town $650,000 for it, and they're charging the ratepayers. You also pay a penny to your sales tax into funding the MBTA. So those are some of the charges against us, if you will. It also includes school choice money. I don't think, we don't allow school choice, right?
We do not accept school choice students into our district.
We have
but
students in school
sometimes
choice out.
students go out.
Quick little myth buster here. Some people will say, oh, the school system is flooded with kids from other towns and other districts, and that's why it's causing a cost increase here or there. In Massachusetts, you actually have the right to go to school more or less wherever you want. Even if there weren't school choice numbers, if you really wanted to press it, you can get your kid into any public school in the Commonwealth, because the dollars follow the students. So if you really, I think Concord or Lexington probably have some of the best school departments in the state. If you really wanted your kid to go from Norwood there, you fought hard enough, people are just going to say, fine, you're allowed to let them in. Why doesn't that happen very often? Who's going to get up in the morning and drive to Lexington to bring their kid there? But realistically, if you push hard enough, you're going to be able to get your kid into any school in the Commonwealth, because the aid and the requirement follows the student. It doesn't necessarily go with the town. The other state aid, I'm trying to think of other state aid charges, small items like that we get charged back. So again, the Commonwealth giveth and the Commonwealth taketh away. The governor's released his budget for this year, and the state finally released their version of the budget. The state budget shows we're going to get about $30,000 to $40,000 more than what the governor's budget showed. But when you first looked at the numbers, it showed about a $280,000 increase in state aid and a $240,000 increase in state charges. So it's kind of a money washing game where at the end of the day, we're getting an extra $40,000, which is better than the number going down. Because most years what happens is the governor releases his budget, you say, yay, we're getting a bunch of state aid, and then the House released their budget, and you say, oh, all right, my state aid went up a little bit, and then you click on the charges sheet, and all of a sudden you've actually lost money. So it looks positive for this year. The governor and the House have at least somewhat agreed on the budget. It still has to go through the census and then a consensus process. And then the state needs to actually make sure they have enough revenue to fund that, but at least it's looking positive. But state aid does end up being a significant revenue stream to the town. New growth is another important revenue stream, and what new growth is additions to the tax base. So the easiest way to think of what new growth is you have a flat piece of land and there's nothing there. Somebody builds a house, we're now taxing the house. That tax revenue is new growth. Simple as it is. We're down a little bit from a peak in the last couple of years, but we're averaging about $1 million a year in new growth, so that's $1 million in new tax dollars that people are paying every year. That's a good number. It's not a great number, but we're limited by the fact that we don't have any available land. Now, we're averaging about $900,000 a year. I was having dinner with a colleague of mine last night because town managers tend to hang out with other town managers because we're all kind of nerds when it comes to this. And the town of Cohasset is actually doing about $900,000 a year in new growth. Now, they're a town of 8,200 people and they're a coastal community. What they're doing, unfortunately for them, I guess unfortunate for us, I mean, they're seeing $1 million homes being torn down and $5 and $6 million homes being built. So for a town of 30,000 people compared to a town of 8,200 people, they're doing the same amount of new growth that we're doing on average. But this is an important economic health indicator, but remember, it is somewhat limited by how much land we actually have available in town. We don't have acres and acres to do new subdivisions where you have $700,000 or $800,000 houses going up 30 or 40 or 50 a year. So if you look at the actual property taxes and the tax levy, and we refer to the tax levy, that's really the amount of money we're taking out of the tax base. It's a fixed amount every year. It's that amount that goes up by 2.5% every year, for those of you who are familiar with Proposition 2.5. So it's not your taxes can't go up 2.5% a year, your taxes can go up a lot a year. We can't increase the tax levy more than 2.5% a year. If you look at our average single-family tax bill, and that's really the best way to look at whether or not how taxes are lower compared to other communities. You can't look at the tax rate. The rate, in some ways, is completely irrelevant. It's just reflective of the value of properties. If the value of every town and every property in Norwood tomorrow doubled like that, the tax rate would simply be cut in half. You'd still be paying the same amount of money because we'd still have a $70 million tax levy. The state average right now is, where are we in 2019? We're at 4,900 or so. These are rough numbers. The state average is about between 55 and 5,800. So we're actually below the state average for our single-family tax bill. And again, that's the number we want to look at. What is the average resident paying in Norwood? That's a number that just about every town calculates. There's no average commercial tax bill because commercial properties range from an $80,000 little convenience store, a $100,000 little store somewhere, up to $30 and $40 billion properties. So there's really no average commercial property per se. And just to compare to a couple of our neighboring communities, and some of this information gets included in the budget. The average tax bill in Norwood, 4,900. So 2019 was actually 6,000 in the state, so it's been going up quite a bit. Value of properties in neighboring towns, average single-family tax bill in neighboring towns. So good old Westwood right next to us at $11,200 is their average tax bill. So two charts that I just wanted to show that are a little bit interesting. This is the percentage of income based on Department of Revenue numbers that the tax bill costs you in Norwood. And what you're seeing is a very slight, not necessarily statistically significant decrease. That's a positive trend line. That means that in 2015, the tax bill was about, looks like it's 12.8% of the average family's income. It's declined a little bit to just under 12%. I'd say it's probably 11.8%. That's a positive trend. I've seen those numbers go in the opposite direction, and that's not a good trend to be in. It's not necessarily statistically significant yet, but it's a positive trend. Same thing over here. The percent of the tax bill as it relates to the value of the home has been largely steady or ever so slight decline. That's actually a good economic indicator. If the June 3rd override question passes, you would have a year where these numbers sort of didn't look as good because you see a big jump in that outer year. But as long as that trend continues, that's an indication that the actual growth in spending is not too high in Norwood, and it's an indication that the actual wealth level in the community is ever so slightly increasing. Now, I don't know if it's increasing beyond inflation, but again, if those numbers look more like this, that would be a bad thing. If they look like this, something funky would be going on. But that they're slightly going this way is actually a good indicator for the community. Free cash. For those of you who are new to town meeting, free cash is sort of our surplus revenue left at the end of the year. And it's an indicator of how much flexibility is in the town's budget, what our fiscal health is. Are we over-projecting or under-projecting revenues? If we project $1 million revenue and we only take in $800,000, it decreases that number. If we project $1 million and we take in 1.2, it increases that number, which is a good thing. So you'll notice our free cash has kind of been a little bit all over the place. These are some averages up here. We're currently at $1.7 million. To put that in perspective, the town of Brentham, much smaller than us, just did $3.2 million in free cash. Needham is between $8 and $10 million. God knows they've got plenty of money in Needham. The town of Adams, where I used to work, had effectively a $9.5 million budget, and we did about $1.5, $1.3 million a year. So our free cash generation as a percentage of the whole budget is somewhat small. And this year, coming in at $1.6 million, it's a little bit on the smaller side. That's why we're not able to be really using any of that free cash to offset the budget this year, because there just isn't a lot of it there. Some of it needs to be kept for capital expenses, for one-time expenses. Some of it needs to be kept for, you maybe want to put it in other fund balances or pay for things the town wants to do. $1.7 million is a very low number for a town our size.
Tony,
Yep.
is it worth mentioning the effect of the free cash level on bond ratings and the income?
Sure. So we keep cash in mainly two accounts, our free cash and our stabilization fund. Bond rating agencies, so credit agencies, look at the town's creditworthiness just as they do your own personal creditworthiness. And the amount of money we have on hand is the number one thing they look at. They also look at the generation of that cash. So if we were keeping a minimum balance in there and we stuck to a policy, that's a positive thing. The higher that balance, the better it is. But what they want to see is predictability as well. This is not predictability. This is we're kind of going all over the place. That shows that decisions are sort of going like this. Things are going into the budget, they're going out of the budget. We're spending a lot, we're spending a little. That doesn't look good. Just like your own, if somebody's looking at you to buy a house, you don't want to see your credit rating going up and down and up and down. You don't want to see your borrowing going up and down and up and down and up and down. You want to sort of smooth it out a little. So that means you have predictable revenues in your budget, and you have predictable expenses in your budget, and you're spending according to a plan. The more money we have in the bank, the better the credit rating is. We're currently a AAA plus rated community, which is very good. AA, we'll get to AAA. The goal is to get to a AAA credit rating. What that does is it saves us money on all of our borrowing. And for some of the small projects we were borrowing for, $100,000, $200,000, it's not that big of a deal. But we'll be borrowing money for a middle school that will probably end up costing $100 million. We'll have to borrow about half of that. So those couple of percentage points on a $50 million borrowing, the state usually pays for half of any new schools, starts to add up to real money over the years. Substantial money. So 1.7 million, we're probably going to spend that down to about $400,000 this year, which is below sort of the minimum threshold we'd like to be, but tough times sometimes call for tough measures. Our stabilization fund, which is our primary savings account for the town, this is really what rating agencies look at first and foremost. You'll notice again, we've kind of gone down, up, flat, down, up, flat, down, up, flat. We're slowly arching up, which is a good thing. We did borrow money out of this fund several years ago for the DPW building to put sort of a large cash payment down on it. The rating agencies weren't thrilled with that, but the town, you need to make a decision based on not just what the rating agencies want, but what the residents want and what's best for the rate holders and the taxpayers. We've committed to paying that back over time. I think we have 1 or 2 more years before we'll get back to the year we were before we took money out. The year we should be at the end of next fiscal year. But we want to continue that amount of money into that savings account, because when you think of your own personal finances, how much cash do you have on hand? We're a $200 million operation, and we've got $4.4 million in the budget. So that's not really a number we could spend down unless there was a real emergency. If we were to spend anything out of stabilization today, I can guarantee it would knock our credit rating down. We sort of just barely kept our rating with the last round of borrowing that we did. So that number should be quite a bit higher.
Sorry, what would we consider like a real emergency?
So we had a problem on the Dean Street, the culvert under the Dean Street Bridge collapsed. We're borrowing to fix that because we can live without the culvert, but something like a bridge collapse, a major facility issue, if you had a huge change in the town's finances one way or another, something mid-year change, that's actually where you would go for a mid-year adjustment. So the economy tanks, for instance, and all of a sudden in November we realize we're not going to get $4.9 million in excise taxes, we're going to get $2.9 million in excise taxes. Making cuts to the budget in the middle of the year is incredibly difficult to do. Quick example of that is if you have a $60,000 salary and you say, oh, it's the middle of the year, we're going to start cutting things. Well, if you're in the middle of the year, you've already paid that person half the salary. So how do you get out and actually do that? But it would be a real emergency to the point where we wouldn't care that it would hurt our credit rating.
Question on the credit rating aspect. I used to work for a consumer rating bureau, and their time frame, even though they're keeping records going back 7 years, their formula was only looking technically about 24 months. Past that 24 months, the impact drops off radically. But for what time frame did they look at data for their rating?
That's a good question. They don't have a set amount, but they're generally looking back the last decade or so, because a lot of our longer term debt is 30 and 40, it's not 30 and 40 year debt, but it's 20 and 30 year debt. Whereas most people, if they have a 30-year debt, it's just their mortgage. So it's, if you paid your mortgage the last 2 years, good, you're doing pretty well. We're constantly borrowing a lot of money. I don't, Bernie, do we have any, or Mark, do we have any 40-year sewer or water bonds? I know the USDA, through their rural development program, some towns, cities and towns will borrow money from USDA over 40 years. School projects are limited to under 30 years, but they're taking a longer outlook, and they're focusing more on the management of what we're doing. So they actually dig into our details more than the average credit rating agency does. The credit agency is going to say, is everything paid on time? Yep. You have a low debt limit? Yep. Good, you're go. I mean, we get a much more detailed look about how we're spending our money and what we're doing with our money to get a credit rating. And a lot of it depends on how much cash you have in the bank. Whereas it's interesting, your own personal credit rate, it's all about what you borrow, what you're spending, and if you're making your payments on time. You could have $12 million in the bank, and Experian doesn't care that you're sitting on $12 million in the bank. Our rating agencies would care that we have $12 million in the bank. They'd be very happy with us.
How much you have currently under your available limits?
Exactly, that's what they look at. If your credit card is a $10,000 balance, they don't want you to go over $5,000. And you could, if it's at $7,000, you're going to lose a few points, and they don't care that you had $12 million in the bank. So we're a little different, but we're no different than many cases than how businesses borrow money. Tom, did you have a question or? No. Our pension fund, we participate in the same pension fund that every city and town in Massachusetts and every state employee is in. We have our own Norwood fund, if you will. Some towns have their own independent fund like we do. Some towns are part of larger county systems or regional systems. Our funding, like a lot of towns, hasn't recovered at the same rate that the market as a whole has recovered, but we're on an upward swing. We're at about 80% funded, or we will be probably next year. We're projected to be fully funded in 2028. I think there's a handful of towns that are probably fully funded on their pension system in Massachusetts, but they're either real small or they generally the very wealthy towns that have put a lot of money away for it. We at one point were over 100% funded. The market took a dive, and so did our pension funding ratio. Bristol County is at like 55%, so we're I think, Tom Quaid was here, he would know the number. We're high in the state in terms of how well funded we are, and we'll reasonably be fully funded by 2028. The only caveat there is the Commonwealth dictated a long time ago that everyone would be fully funded on their pensions by 2018. And then that number was 2022, and then it was 2024, and then it was 2026, and then it was 2028 and 2030, because it is subject to the market and to market volatility. But we're doing well with our pension fund. We are the custodian of that fund, but we don't actually own that fund. It's owned and held by our retirees. We just realistically, we just pay into it and it shows up on our balance sheet, but it's actually owned by the retirees of the town. And the system is the same across all 351 towns in Massachusetts. Interesting fact, we actually don't pay for teachers' pensions. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts pays that. We pay the administrator's cost and the support staff, janitors, some paraprofessionals, depending on whether or not they're actual teachers. So that is one item that the Commonwealth does fund on behalf of cities and towns that we often don't talk about because we don't want to remind the state that they actually give money for that through the pension system. But that's also a common system in many states where they don't want cities and towns having access to a teacher's pension system. Real quick funny story, Texas is going through a debate on whether or not to put in their own sort of Proposition 2.5. And cities and towns are, of course, pushing back, saying it works, it doesn't work. The last amendment before the Texas Senate a couple days ago was to limit school spending to 2.5%, because they have separate taxing districts and schools, but cities and towns would be allowed to go to 3.5%. I said, that's great, but that'd be a wonderful reversal, right? But they're going through all sorts of crazy stuff. They tried to exempt public safety, they wouldn't exempt public safety. They tried to exempt just municipal services, they wouldn't do that. They tried to exempt fire, they wouldn't exempt that. So Texas is having the same battles that we're having. Their state legislature does not work in cities and towns the way we do, although nobody's interested at the state level in changing anything. Around 2.5, it's considered a third rail in state politics. But I thought it was funny that they felt cities and towns should get 3.5%, and school districts should be limited to 2.5%. I didn't have a slide on our OPEB fund, so I'll just talk briefly before we go into general government budgets. OPEB is our retiree healthcare fund. We're legally obligated by laws in the state to fund retiree healthcare. We have a area on our balance sheet that shows our deficit there. We should have about $156 million in our OPEB fund. We have about $2.5 million, but that is not uncommon for towns in Massachusetts. It's a change in accounting practices that makes you report a full liability, but we've been making progress toward our OPEB funding. It's now going to start to impact our credit rating. So what we have to be able to prove to the credit agencies is that we're trying to do what we can do every year. We do contribute about $250,000 cash into the fund every year. We otherwise direct pay for all of our retiree health care costs. This year at town meeting, we'll be trying to move the remainder of the health insurance budget to the OPEB trust fund. That's a good practice that a lot of towns do because you got to find funding from a lot of different sources. It's nothing that's just going to get solved with money from one source. So we're going to move on to the general government budgets. These are actually going to go pretty quickly, so if you do have a question on one of them, raise your hand. We can always go back to it. One of the reasons we present these as a whole is that they're mostly small departments in town hall where there's 3 or 4 employees and a small office budget, so they tend to go a little bit quicker. I tend to go through them, and then we have the larger department heads present their budget. So as I go through, just yell out if you have a question. The Board of Selectmen's office, change showing down about $23,000. Mainly we've had some staff changes in there where employees are at a lower step scale than in the previous year. We're also changing the cost accounting practices with the light department to make sure we're fully booking the portion of the Selectmen's office in the capacity as light commissioners is booked to the light department. You'll see that throughout several of these, but no staffing changes. And incidentally, the selectmen in Norwood do not receive a stipend, they don't receive compensation. That's actually rare in Massachusetts. The norm is that they do receive a stipend or do receive some sort of money. Sometimes it's $800 or $900, sometimes it's $4,000 or $5,000. And some towns in Massachusetts still give their Board of Selectmen health insurance. So we, I don't know, Bernie, have we ever done that or? No. We've never done it. So some towns, a lot of towns changed away from that about 10 or 12 years ago. Norwood never actually did it. And if you think a small stipend wouldn't cause an issue, having worked in a town where I think the selectmen got $800 a year, people would constantly throw it in their faces. We pay you $800 a year for, 600 hours of work.
Right?
Yeah.
Do they get recompense for, travel or anything like that? Expenses?
Not in town. If they went to a conference, we would reimburse them for the mileage just like we would anywhere else. But if Tom gets up in the morning and goes to an event at the park, we don't reimburse them for that.
If I have to pay for the event, I get reimbursed for that.
Or if there's a meeting in Boston and, parking in Boston is a
The
$4.
MMA is the big one, Mass Municipal Associations, a couple of nights in a hotel plus events.
But there's not just where they're driving around town and going to different events and going to meet with the town manager and say, oh, whoops, 4 miles from my house, so I'm going to put in for a $2 mileage. And they don't get expense accounts. They don't go to Dunkin' Donuts and say, well, I'm on my way to meet with the town manager, so, expense my coffee or anything like that. They basically get one conference they're allowed to go to a year, and then we always hit them up for money for different events and other things, so it's cash negative for them. So their budget, again, other than that accounting change and some new staff being compensated at a lower rate just because they're not at the same scale, they're not at the same experience level, really no changes there. It's a two-person office. The operating expenses for the department largely flat. We did move one line that wasn't being used out. The general manager's office showing a decrease of about $19,000. Again, not a real decrease. That's a cost shift to the light department to practice a better enterprise fund accounting. So it looks like we're down $20,000. We're not. Because my office budget is at $666,000, I wouldn't be upset at town meeting if somebody motioned to add or take away $500 or $600 to get it off the 666 number, but we'll get there. No major changes in the manager's office. We've adjusted a couple of numbers. It's mainly the seasonal help number. We sometimes ignore those seasonal help numbers. We do bring in either interns or seasonal help to help with filing and office coverage. And then what happens is you go years and years and you don't adjust it, and minimum wage starts going up, and then you realize you're running out of money at the beginning of August for your seasonal help. No major staff changes here, other than we reclassified one position. We had 2 executive secretaries in the office. We'll now have 1 executive secretary and a budget analyst in the office. The Finance Commission, their budget is up a whopping $307. This is mainly, the increase is mainly the cost of staff support to the Finance Commission, so they're note-taking in their minutes. And their actual office budget, you'll notice, is flat. And then you'll notice the audit costs that we have here are remain flat for the next couple of years. The Finance Commission also do not receive any stipends from the town. Finance and accounting, so this is the actual accounting office. We're showing a big decrease here of $74,000, but that's actually a cost shift. We are moving one, it was a part-time benefited position from the accountant's office to the HR office. So it looks positive that we're decreasing the budget there. It's not actually going down that much. It just shows that it's going down that much. Those of you who have been town meeting members for a while know we used to have the clerk and the accountant's office together. We've now segregated them. So again, you'll notice the actual operating cost of the budget, no big difference. There was the light department cost shift as well. And the salary number here looking like it went down. It didn't really go down. That just got shifted over to the HR department, which we'll show in just a moment. The assessor's office, here again, shows a big decrease of $74,000. My math is actually wrong there. The assessor's office budget is down about $260,000. We completed our 10-year property revaluation. That had been booked to the assessor's department budget. That's done, so that comes out of the assessor's budget. One of the systems that we're changing with the new accounting system is to better account for capital items or one-time expense items like that, so you can actually trend out the operating expenses of a department as opposed to one-time expenses, because then it makes it look like the department's going up and down when it really didn't. Something like that gets approved, it then gets dumped into the budget, and then it looks like we've cut it the next year. We haven't actually cut it. It was a late year addition. You'll notice the assessor's budget, it shows that big decrease here, but it's not really a big decrease. It was a one-time expense that got booked there.
Can I ask a question about the previous one about the Finance Commission?
Sure can.
Those salaries that are in there, or the cost for staff, are those costs that are costed out from other positions?
No, that's actually a portion of the town accountant's salary, who serves as the clerk to the...
Okay, that's what I was asking, or was it specific to...
You know, and some boards and committees have just sort of note takers. The FinCon moved away from that years ago because it's tough to have somebody taking the notes of the minute, That's not also the town accountant who's also providing the information. So eventually that will get booked in the town accountant's salary line, but we just haven't made that change yet to make it a little bit more transparent. Good question. Treasurer's office, again, showing a decrease because of some of the changes in light department, accounting with the light department. If you think of our treasurer's office, they collect all the tax bills, but they also collect all the light bills. It's a very busy office, so that's, again, what I would say, only somebody in government would say. It's not a real decrease, it's just a paper decrease. But that's just a cost shifting of that cost over the light department to make sure that they're fully bearing the cost of the service that they provide.
For this specifically, do we expect this account to further decrease with the implementation of the automation of the new accounting system?
For the treasurer's office? So the short answer is maybe. We might be able to, once we're fully there, see one or two positions, somebody retires that we don't need to fill. What would really make a difference is the more online payments and purchases we can go to would actually help that. We face a little bit of a challenge with that, there are a lot of people out there who still like to pay cash. There are a lot of people who like to come in and pay their bill manually. I've never paid my electric bill at town hall. I've never paid my cable bill at town hall. I like to pay everything automatically and online, and I write one check a month for my rent, and then usually it's for something else. I gotta go find the checkbook for it. That would actually allow us to eventually see a decrease in the staffing there, but it is only a full-time office of 7, so we're not, we're not a TripAdvisor or a Netflix or something like that, where new software is going to say, oh great, we can dump dozens and dozens of people. I think what you'll see in the next couple of years is as positions retire, we either reclass them or we don't fill them, or we have a need for more planning staff, for instance. We say, well, we can go without one clerk at the treasurer's office, let's move it over here. The challenge is when those retirements come and when those reallocations come versus how far along we are in the implementation process. So if somebody were to leave today, it's like, we're going to have to fill the position because we're still doing a lot of manual collection. 6 months from now, somebody leaves, we might be able to say, you know what, don't need to fill it. The light department might see 1 or 2 positions in billing, but that's a year to a year and a half after we fully implemented the new billing software, and we're looking at what our call volume is. So we think we'll see some of those savings. The school side, I mean, there might be a payroll position here or there that we might be able to lose, but again, it's when that person goes. If they go today, God knows we're going to need them tomorrow. A year or 2 from now, we'll see some savings from there, and that's a good way to kind of address some other staffing issues, or just take the savings and say, hey, we don't need 7 anymore, we only need 5. But paying more bills online, which is challenging for us because when we use credit cards, we either need to bear the cost of that credit card or we're charging the consumer. Property taxes, we can't actually do, there's really no easy way to do the property taxes with a credit card because the fee that we have to pay to the vendor decreases how much money we're taking. So it's a little complicated for us, but we're eventually with the new software going to move to a lot of our smaller fees and everything, birth certificates and stuff like that. Everything that's under a certain amount is we're just going to allow people to use credit cards for, we'll just absorb the cost. Property taxes are the big challenge with that, though.
My recommendation is going to be, if you really want to drive charges online, eliminate the fees. Eliminate the fees for cable bill paying online. Eliminate them. I know it's nominal, but some people, I've talked to people, they really don't want to pay that 75 cents.
Yeah.
If you really want to drive people online.
The real problem is just the property tax, because we collect about 70 million in property taxes a year. You can set up an ACH for your checking account, your electric account with Norwood Light, which has 2 benefits. 1, you don't have to come in and pay your bill. And 2, you're always going to get your prepaid discount. So that option is there. Broadband, we allow you to pay online with a credit card, or we allow you to auto pay with a credit card. I don't think we have a fee associated with that, do we? What about for the auto payment? There's not for the ACH with the broadband?
There's no ACH fee, but there's a fee with the credit card.
Okay, so we can look at that for broadband. Again, that's one of those things where do we take the, does it flow into free cash and what that percentage is? But the frustrating thing for us, there are people out there who just love to pay cash and they love to keep coming in to pay cash, and it's just, the treasurer's office is constantly busy. Every day I walk out of my office and there's people in there they like to pay their cash, they like to pay their checks. It's about getting the consumers to change over as much as it is to get you and I. That being said, I've never paid a bill in cash in the treasurer's office.
They love coming to town hall.
They do.
That's part of it. I've talked to people, they just love coming to Norwood Town Hall.
It is an impressive building. We wouldn't want to lose that, but it's just people love paying their bills in person. Town council, this is our cost for municipal legal services. Not much of a change here other than a small cost accounting change. Our labor council is that cost right there. This is for our regular legal retainer for MHCL, which is our law firm, as well as any retainers that we need to have. Our legal expenses are actually, believe it or not, in line with other towns our size. Municipalities are litigious by nature, and we get sued for a lot of things, so we need to maintain a certain amount of counsel. I'm actually a fan of spending money on lawyers instead of litigation. Lawyers are cheap, lawsuits are expensive. So this might be something we look at in a few years. We may want to increase some of the lines to make sure that we're being as aggressive as we can in using our labor council and using our town council and just making sure we're crossing the I's and dotting the T's. Human resources, as I said, this department shows a large increase of about $66,000. That was for 2 primary items. One is the costing of the part-time but benefited position from the accountant's office to move over to HR. We think we can get more bang for the buck there. All of our costs is in our personnel. HR sort of manages those costs. They manage the grievance process. They're sort of the first point in the organization where somebody goes when they have an employment issue. They manage the benefits for both town employees, the retiree benefits, and school employees. So it's probably been under-resourced for a while, and given that millions of dollars of payroll and benefits actually kind of flow at one point or another through the HR office, we want to invest in that HR office. We also are adding a little bit of money to some management and supervisory training, something else we've been a little bit negligent on that we're trying to build on in coming years. We also, unfortunately, have to comply with OSHA requirements now. Not that we didn't have safety standards before, but the Commonwealth had their own system of safety standards and decided to say, well, let's just go with OSHA because we think it's better, not realizing that it's a cost of thousands of dollars to us. The light department in particular is going to have to pick up tens of thousands of dollars in cost, thousands of dollars to the DPW. This is just for some of the training associated with our supervisors and with OSHA-related training. So, yay, Commonwealth. Yep.
All right, because I've seen the COLA in a lot of the lines. Is that COLA, is the same rate used across all town departments? And then what is that rate?
Generally, yes, it's 2.5%. It's usually dictated by what your union contracts agree to. In most towns, when you're giving a cost of living increase in one contract, you're more or less going to give it in just about every other contract. The reason being that if you end up before what's known as the JLMC, which governs public safety contracts, or an arbitration in a contract, they're going to ask you, well, what are you giving your other employees? So in a perfect world, we'd really truly negotiate every contract individually, but really that COLA ends up being sort of the standard across departments. It leads to a lot of hurt feelings as well as legal challenges if we went and gave the police department 6% cost of living increases in each year, which would be insane, and then you go to the fire department and say, well, you're only getting 1% each year. It's tough to sort of do that. Even though in theory we should be able to bargain with each one individually, that COLA ends up becoming everyone sort of gets the same COLA. We're locked in, we do 3-year contracts, which is statutory in Massachusetts. Right now we're at a 2.5% increase each year. FY20 is the last year of those, the third year of those 3-year contracts where it's a 2.5% increase, and then it's up to negotiation after that. But good question. Yep.
I know it's not much, but does OSHA allow grant money to cover that? Because I've seen some grants for towns for training.
Sometimes for safety equipment, the police department and the DPW have gotten some grants. Usually OSHA doesn't necessarily give out their grants per se, but your insurance company will give out grants for buying different equipment and stuff like that. We go for those every time we can. The challenge we have now is that compliance has changed. So you may have a situation where you didn't have a certification before, now you're required to get a certification. Sometimes it's as simple as, we didn't have yellow tape on these stairs, now we need yellow tape on these stairs. So it's not that it's bad, it's just they're basically taking one system and shifting to another one where the regulations were similar and close, but now we have to comply with a different set of regulations where maybe the aisle isn't lighted and now they're telling us for our employees we have to light the aisle and things like that.
Well, I don't mean grant money coming from OSHA, but from independent sources.
Yeah, our insurance provider actually provides a lot of grants, a lot of small grants, a lot of medium-sized grants.
Tony, you can comment about the fire service here in Massachusetts that because OSHA was signed into the legislation by Governor Baker, the Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts is actually fighting that because they're calling it an unfunded mandate. That they're mandating us to do all this, these changes, but do we have the money or the funds to actually do that? So we're currently fighting it.
In particular, on the fire side, here's an example of why it's complex and why legislation sometimes sounds good in theory and is horrible in practice. OSHA requires you to have a commercial driver's license to drive a fire truck. That had not been the rule in Massachusetts up until now. Some states do, some states don't. So now do I have to go get every single firefighter certified to pass a CDL test? Well, I have a contract that doesn't say that they have to have a CDL test, so I can't just obviously take the contract. And now if we're going to pay to send them all the CDL training, I've got to give them their license. They're probably going to want more money for the license. It becomes a legal obligation of the time on the town side to bargain the impact of that decision. So again, legislation is often great in theory, and then in practice it ends up being a nightmare for us. Any other questions on the HR department? We have a new HR director starting this coming Monday, and our benefits administrator in that office also retired. So Chelsea, who's been our interim or acting HR director, has done a fantastic job keeping the office afloat for the last couple of weeks. I think she's going to pass out the day after the new director gets in because she's been running a mile a minute since then. But we'll have 2 of the 3 new staff, will be 2 of the 3 staff, and they will be new. We're looking forward to a really engaged HR department going forward. Information technology increase in this department, largely due to bringing on some of the costs of the new software system. We're building those in over the couple of years as we get the software system fully up and running. We did appropriate enough money to get us through the first 3 years of the software system, but we need to start building these costs in to make sure we don't run out at the end of the software conversion and find that there's some modules where we wanted to do something and there's simply no money left into it. So I would expect that next year you'll probably see a similar increase in this department's operating budget, and the following year you'll possibly see another increase of maybe $50,000 or $60,000. So we're fully booking the cost of the software. At some point we will shift a little bit of cost for that to the light department for their portion of it, but we haven't brought them online yet. In the town, traditionally they book the whole cost for the software. We don't bill it out to individual departments, we don't bill it out to the schools. It's our system that we're going to have one way or another. IT staffing went up last year or 2 years ago. We have a project manager in-house currently working on the project. We'll probably have to retain that position in a couple of years just to sort of be our key Munis operating position. So we may see some savings over here, but IT is also an area we've probably underinvested in for quite a while. Town clerk's office, the budget shows an increase of $24,000. The town clerk is not on spending spree. All that is we have moved some full-time salaries from the elections and registrars line into the town clerk's line. Which reminds me, while I have everyone's attention, when we get released with the budget is this document here, which I would say is still technically in draft format. This is what we call our detailed expenditure list. So this lists out every change in the budget above or below $1,000. So if you are looking through the budget down the road, and you're saying, wait a minute, why did the town clerk's budget go up, or why did this budget go up? Every line is identified in here with the explanation of why it went up or went down. So as I said, there's it says steps and COLAs, but it's actually the costing change of some of the different the elections and registrations, I believe is what it was. We're also still a little bit in flux with the clerk and accountant's budget, and we will be for another year or two as we sort of separated those departments. We've seen that there were some things booked in one versus booked in another. Elections and registrations, mainly the cost of, and there's actually a layer in here. Elections is basically, the cost is determined by how many elections we end up having. So next year we have 2. We have 2 elections next year. As of right now, we could always end up having more. We have the override election on June 30th. It costs about $30,000. So this is actually a budget you do tend to see float up and down every year that you can't necessarily equalize out because it really does depend on how many elections you have in a year. Community development, we combined planning, zoning, and conservation budgets into one budget. There are 3 separate boards with 3.5, 2 3/4, or 3 1/4 employees supporting them. We put the budgets together because the functions are actually the same for a majority of their operating costs. We're also moving towards a community development model where all of our land use functions are housed in the same department. It's at this point probably a 15 or 20-year-old model that we're just now trying to bring into the fold. It allows joint review of projects and make sure that the 3 boards are communicating with each other and that the staff at a staff level are communicating with each other. It prevents sort of board shopping where, hey, I went to the ZBA and they said I'm all set, so I don't need to go to the Conservation Commission, or vice versa. The planning board gave me this approval, so I'm not going to go talk to this one over here. Their actual operating budget, you'll see, is about $100,000. A lot of it ends up being some of their equipment, their copying. They have to do a lot of mailing. We're trying to condense all that into house. We bought a plotter recently that they all 3 can use. So instead of buying one for this end of the building that handled some planning and conservation, and then some over there with ZBA and that, we've co-located the staff, co-locating the expenses. Paul Helkiotis more or less heads up this whole department as we move towards one consolidated community development department, which again is the more common model, especially in communities our size, but even much smaller communities as common. No substantial changes here, other than we are anticipating a reclassification of one of those positions, and what that means is when you look at a position and likely that description is going to change, it's going to come with a higher salary grade. We're anticipating that mid-year. We're trying to anticipate these things and making sure we're budgeting for them, rather than running in the middle of the year and saying, oops, this happened, let's go and play the game of trying to find money. Municipal building expenses, this covers our both the expenses for the janitors at Town Hall, some of the support staff at Town Hall, as well as other municipal buildings, so it's not the most clear. But this includes the current cost for Forbes Hill, which we have $75,000 budgeted in there. The rest of these utilities are mostly for Town Hall utilities. We are trying to break out in the OCC, so the Morse House and the OCC, buildings that the town owns, we never really budgeted directly for those buildings. We should have a small amount of money budgeted. We've always just pulled it from somewhere, but we're trying to be a little bit more clear about where the costs for any of those buildings are. We own the VFW building. We own the OCC, which pays quite a large lease. The Morse House in South Norwood, we own that as well. We generally don't have to spend too much money on some of these buildings, but we want to make sure that we're actually costing them correctly, not just saying, oh, we've got a cable bill for, not a cable bill, but electric bill for the Morse House. It's only $22. Go find some budget line to take it out of. That $75,000, if we do sell Forbes Hill, will go away next year. We did decrease the number substantially this year. If the building for some reason does not sell, I'm confident it will. We're going to be mothballing the building, and there'll be no access to it. We're going to cut the utilities to it and just not allow access to it. We're decreasing the cost of the annual town report because we are going to print less of them. We're printing the budget books, which I believe comes out of this line a little bit differently in an effort to be a little bit cheaper. We always want a nice, good annual town report available, but we print more than we need, and we make the information available online, so we'll be printing less of them. You could call it a sustainability initiative, but it's really just when you're looking to cut money out of the budget, just print less town reports and have it available at the library. General government unallocated, this is one of those lines where we just throw a lot of items into that we don't have a place for somewhere else, sort of a contingency line. A couple of the items that are in here, this is a general line we use for consultants, and when we say consultants, we don't just bring people in to say, you know, well, we're a management consultant, we think you should have 4 meetings as opposed to 6. It's really when we need to get something engineered, when you need to hire professional support for one item or another, something comes up during the year, we want to do a study on something, that's what we mean when we say consultants. Most towns actually will call that line an engineering line. We break them out here, but that's when we want to do a study or a plan or look at something in the middle of the year. That's sort of the town's only other place to go pull it from. Some of these things are mailings for town meeting. SNARC is it's a program for folks with disabilities that the town funds. Town meeting costs us about 20 grand a year. And then this eyewear line is actually one of the small benefits of changing our accounting software. We have a benefit in most of our union contracts that we will replace, we'll pay up to $250 a year for eyewear if you're required to wear eyewear. We've been budgeting that in every department budget. So, you know, if you had 6 people in there, you would say, okay, let's budget $1,500 or maybe $1,000 and think we're going to need it. Well, as we were condensing the budget down and going through this allocation process, we looked at what we were budgeting in total and what we were spending in total. We found that throughout all our departments, we had about 19 grand budgeted. We're spending about 6 or 7 a year. So we were able to cut that down by $8,000. That was just excess money that we were budgeting that we ended up not needing. Small little benefit. Building commissioner's salary. Building commissioner's office has 6 staff. No real change. That's the cost of step increases and the cost of living increases for the department. He cut his operating budget by $1,000. Total budget change, I actually have a little discrepancy in my numbers there, so we're not updating it. But it's a relatively small budget change. Went from 451 to 460. That's the inspections department. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't ask if you're on the slide. Is there a long-term plan for the Lawrence House?
That's a very good question. To continue to own it and maintain it as an historic asset for the town of Norwood. In terms of a strategic plan of what the building might need over the next 10 or 20 years, we did include a little bit of money in this. We actually haven't included money. We programmed in the capital plan to do an analysis in the next couple of years to have an architect and an engineer come in and say, what are the building's needs over the next 10 to 20 years? What are the condition of it? I know some folks would like to say, well, just look at it and see if it's good, but we really need to rely on engineers and architects to get their professional opinion on what needs to be done to keep the building going.
A related suggestion is, if you find some significant work that needs to be done, this would be a logical candidate for community preservation.
Absolutely. And I think there is some work that needs to get done in the building, but that's why we have the CPA for projects like that. Good question. Emergency management, we continue to keep our emergency management budget flat. At some point, we would like to try to add a little bit down the road to this budget for the, really, we sometimes get a grant from MEMA, which is the state's emergency management agency, to bring in a second or third year student from Mass Maritime to update some of our emergency plans every year. They're studying emergency management down there. We'd like to be able to know we can do that every year. So what happens when they don't, there's a lot of work that ends up needing to get done updating things, and then Bernie ends up doing it, and it just takes away from time elsewhere. But you can get one of these kids at junior, senior in college studying emergency management to go through and update some of these items.
Does Maritime, do they study the river?
Say that again?
Do they study the river, the Ponset River?
No, I was referring to Mass Maritime, the Mass Maritime Academy down in Bourne.
Right, but I know that the Coast Guard has some control over the rivers to a certain point, and I was just wondering if they had anything to do with it.
That I don't know. Mass Maritime generally, the Coast Guard, so I think it's actually the Coast Guard or the Corps of Engineers have control over any navigable waterway. So I'm sure we deal with them on some projects. I used to have to deal with them in my the last community where we had flood chute networks that were technically under the auspices of the Army Corps of Engineers, but they gave us no money for them. They just inspected them and yelled at us to fix things in them. Veteran services, we actually are seeing a decrease in the veteran services budget. This isn't less service that we're providing per se, it's a decrease in the service requests that are coming to us. We're statutorily obligated to provide a certain amount of direct relief to veterans in the community based on their income level. And we've changed some of the accounting practices, we've changed some of our auditing practices. With the improvement in the economy, we're just seeing a less request for some of these services. They're income-based. You have to be a veteran according to the state statute, and you have to live in Norwood. Every town provides this cost. We have decreased the number because we see it coming down quite a bit. It is similar to a commodity cost, where if that cost went up mid-year, we would have to adjust for that cost as well. But you look at your trend analysis and say, gee, we're going to be down probably $70,000 or $80,000 this year, so we feel comfortable we can reduce the amount down. That's just a low request in services coming through. We do get reimbursed 75% for all the direct relief aid that we provide to veterans by the state. So you notice that the main drop is just in the relief being provided. Celebrations, this is the line that covers a lot of the actual celebrations and festivities we have in town. Again, it is level funded with last year. We've been keeping this line roughly at the same amount most years. It is getting tougher and tougher every year to make sure we can have parades and have some of these festivals. So, but it's often one of those things that it's the last thing you go to increase, and sometimes when you need to cut things, it's one of the first budgets you go to cut out. So again, no change in this year, but you can see the 4th of July. And incidentally, most of these festivals tend to raise quite a bit of money as well, also cover some of the costs. So this isn't a full-borne cost for having these festivities in town. But if anyone's been to our 4th of July parade, you know it's one of the best parades in the Commonwealth. It does come with a substantial cost. Debt service, this is just the debt that the town owes for various building projects, large equipment, water and sewer. So there is a jump from FY19 to FY20. This number here is commingled, at least in this number, with what's paid for by the utilities. So oftentimes when there's a big jump, it's either you've done a big project or more likely it's actually utility debt. So for budgeting purposes, we show this one number, but it's actually broken out to excluded debt, non-excluded debt, and utility debt. Yep.
So none of this is related to a decrease in free cash?
Correct. This is just the check for all the mortgages we got to pay.
Can you explain the difference between inside the limit and outside?
Sure. So there's two kinds of debt that we borrow. And remember, think of debt as just a mortgage. When it's inside the levy, what that means is it's part of Prop 2.5. So it's just like any other expense in the budget. So we borrow $1 million and we got to pay back $100,000 a year. That $100,000 goes into the budget. It's a budgeted item and it counts against our annual 2.5% increase like any other expense. Outside the levy is what's called a debt exclusion. And that's when you raise the amount of money to cover that service above and beyond Prop 2.5. The only debt excluded levy increase we have right now is for the high school. And that's how you do most school building projects, is it goes beyond the levy limit. So you say, we're not going to include this item in the budget, usually because they're too large to include in the operating budget without having to cut a lot of things in a lot of other places. School projects are common. That debt also falls off when that project is done. So that's different than an operational override, which is on the June 3rd ballot, where that's a permanent increase in the tax levy. We basically, with the debt exclusion, you say, all right, we're going to increase the tax levy by $1 million. It equates to, and I'm making the number up here, but it equates to $20 a month for the average taxpayer. And when that debt service is paid off, so when we pay off the high school, your taxes would go down by that amount. You usually don't see too big of a benefit for it because after 20 or 25 years have gone by, that portion of your tax bill is actually not as large as it was when you first borrowed the money. So we could fund a school project inside the levy limit. If it's a $2 million debt payment, that's a lot of money. I mean, at a bare minimum, out of an $18 million debt budget, most of which is utility debt, that's a huge number to cover. Some towns do it. If they have flexibility in their budget, they have the amount of money, they can do it. But usually large projects, you're going for a debt exclusion anyway. Oftentimes new facilities are debt exclusions to make sure that you're not squeezing your budget for the new facility, but every town does it a little bit differently in terms of whether they go for a debt exclusion or whether they go for a do it within the levy limit. Yep.
So is the 4.3 million interest, is that based on the 14.3
Correct.
projected total debt? Is that total debt and total interest?
So that's our total debt payment. So that's not how much money we owe. Our total owed amount is probably, I think it's around 105 million.
Oh, I got you.
Does that sound right?
So that's why the interest payment is so high. I got you.
Absolutely. So that's our mortgage payment and that's our mortgage interest. And the home we own is worth $100 million. That's the way to think about it. Any other questions on debt service? Yeah.
It might be helpful just on this slide, really, just I think that was a really great question, to put the total amount of debt that you're servicing in each year, so people can see how that changes over time too.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I mean, this was just pulled right from the actions of the debt, but it's the last series of budget presentations I did, we actually had several slides where we sort of went through the debt and explained it and showed it. We should have, I just copied this right from the budget, but we should also explain down here what's utility debt and what's non-utility debt. Because you look at the number and you think it's really big, and you see really at the end of the day, a lot of it's utility debt. And water, sewer, and electric, they're always heavily extended with debt. That's how utilities are function today.
You get about 3.6 million of that is in the operating budget. Principal interest is about 1.8 is debt exclusion. So roughly the
we actually don't have a whole lot of debt per se. Our debt level for a town is actually relatively low. Water and sewer and light departments are always heavily indebted. Retirement and pension contribution, 911 is just an account number, so it's not just police or anything like that. This is our annual pension cost, so that is what we pay directly into the pension system every year. This number here, it went down from $40,000 to $25,000, was a payment for a few folks who actually started working with the town prior to the town's pension system. The town's pension system predates Social Security, so those are some very old elderly folks still on the pre-pension system. Quick fact, municipal employees don't pay into Social Security, don't receive Social Security because the state's pension system predates the Social Security. Unfortunately, I do believe this number is going to decrease. I think that individual has passed away, but those were the two remaining pre-pension system individuals. Workers' compensation, the town is self-funded for workers' comp. We've been lucky that we're able to generally slide in under the limit with workers' comp. Those of you who are familiar with workers' comp know sometimes it could be as simple as a $200 broken finger claim or twisted finger claim in urgent care, or it could be a serious injury costing tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more. Police and fire are for retired officers. This is a medical line, but their actual workers' comp is separate. They're not subject to workers' comp in Massachusetts. There's police and fire accident insurance. It's a whole different system because they're not rated the same way ordinary employees are because of the risk level in their jobs. We'd like eventually to just have some nice cheap workers' comp insurance. Unfortunately, every time we get a quote for it, it far exceeds this number. So it's one of those things that we'd love to do, but the number far exceeds what's in there, so it comes into competition with everything else in the budget. Our good old health insurance number. So the total number for health insurance is $14.4 million. That includes our contribution to our OPEB trust fund, and this is retiree health care and current health care. And remember, I know some folks will say that retiree health care is so generous and you don't see it in the private sector anymore. That may be the case, but it's also state law in Massachusetts, so it's not something we can actually control at the local level to a certain extent. And our cost for retirees who are 65 and over is actually not that substantial. It's around $3,200 a year for a Medicare supplement plan. It's the pre-65 retirees where we do have a high cost for that retiree health care. Medicare, we do pay Medicare just like everyone else, so this is just up as a collection of the budget. Our liability insurance, mainly our property and casualty. Again, we've been holding it relatively flat. We are insured through a group known as MIA, which is the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Authority. It's an insurance company that exclusively focuses on towns and cities, so they know our risk pool. We're in a risk pool with other cities and towns. They're very good. Some towns do go out and get insurance on the open market, but it ends up being, if you do save a couple of dollars, you lose the benefit of an insurer who knows how cities and towns operate. Well, more often than not, if you call them ahead of time and say, are we covered? The answer is usually yes. You're just going to get it in writing from them because I've had them say yes and then say that they didn't remember that conversation. But we have a good insurer. We do a lot of things to save money for our insurance. There's different workshops and programs we go to where they will give us rebates for attending them. We do get a couple $1,000s in grants from them every year. And because it's all cities and towns in a pool, it's not all of us, it's most of us. When they have a really good year, their profit sharing actually will come back and reduce the amount that you owe. So it's a really great pool to be in. This is just where we record the money we put into the stabilization account. So it's called the intergovernmental transfer. It's $428,000, $571. We at some point will probably just equalize that number so it's an even number, but we'll keep every dollar in there for now. So we've got two more presentations for tonight. They will go quicker than I did. The full budget document will be available around the start of town meeting. Around the time of the special. And this coming Thursday we have Police, Recreation, Council on Aging, Board of Health, and this Monday we have the capital plan, and this coming Wednesday or next Wednesday we have the school department budget. So I believe next up is Chief Maurice. Yes. All right. Take a brief moment here while Susan figures this out. Forward and back. And that's everyone on the laser and
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chief George Maurice with the Norwood Fire Department. I'm a 30-year veteran. I was recently appointed chief in September. This is all new to me, so if you could have some patience, I would appreciate it. If I don't know any answers to your questions, just let me know, and I will make sure that I get that information to you at a future date, and then hopefully I'll have everything for regular town meeting. The Norwood Fire Department for 2018 had a total response number of 5,730 runs. We are an extremely busy fire department. If you compared us to any one individual fire department in Boston, you would see that our numbers are somewhat comparable, not the overall department. We're busier than any other local town in the area. If you look at the responses, the majority of our responses are in the 4,000 run range. That is rescue, which is comprised mostly of emergency medical services, our ambulances. If you combine fire responses, non-fire responses, and non-fire false alarms, that comes to be roughly around 2,000 runs. So not as busy as the ambulance, but the trucks, the apparatus, the engines, the ladder, squad, they're also very busy. In 2018, we had 216 fires in the town. Those are comprised of structure fires, brush fires, dumpster fires, anything where there's any type of fire source in it, we consider that a fire. In 2018, we did 3,994 emergency medical services runs. That is the ambulances. We run 2 ambulances here in Norwood, an advanced life support ambulance, which has paramedics on it, and a basic life support ambulance, which has basic EMTs on it. With these run numbers, the ambulances are responding, but we also have other pieces of apparatus that respond with the ambulance. Many times we have a squad truck that responds with the ambulance. If it's a motor vehicle accident, we send an engine in case we need to use the jaws of life. So it's not just the ambulance strictly, we also have other pieces running with them. For the operating budget for
Chief,
yes.
do you have numbers on mutual aid provided and mutual aid received?
I do not have it with this, but I can easily get that. I provide that every month to the selectmen.
Thank you.
So for the fiscal FY20, we're looking at an increase of roughly $450,000. The majority of that increase is from COLA, or cost of living adjustments. As Town Manager Mizuko said, that's a 2.5%, which is contractually obligated to the firefighters to use that. And every line in the fire department budget is level funded except for a few. The first one that is not level funded is the fire department salaries account. Well, actually, I'll start with salary for the department head, which is myself. Looks a little bit different than what it did in previous years with the chief, because he had a salary, but he also received different stipends, such as an education stipend, longevity, things of that nature. When I was appointed chief, Town Manager Mizuko wanted to roll everything into one finite number, so that's why my salary appears to have increased from last year. I don't have that comparison chart. I'll have that for the town meeting. Here, the full-time salaries has gone up to 2.5%, but there's also an increase of $75,000 there. I am asking for a second deputy chief's position at the department. I've been on the department 30 years, as I said. Before I came on the department, there were 2 deputy chiefs, but that was, one of them was taken away. And because the department has grown so much, I feel as though it's time and it's needed to have a second deputy chief. One of the main reasons why I want that position is to have a training officer. Many times we do have scheduled training throughout the week and the month, but because we are such a busy department, the apparatus and the ambulances are constantly being called out during training. So many times the members of the department miss that training for the day. With an individual who is dedicated to that training, we can make sure that everyone receives it and completes it. And the deputy chief's position will also cover other aspects of the department, whether it's administrative issues, anything that the first deputy chief does, which is working with commercial businesses, going over blueprints, making sure all life safety systems are properly installed in any commercial businesses here in town. The go down the line here. Another increase that you will see, which I don't have that comparison chart again, but is the EMT pay here. This account is going to be going up by the 2.5% COLA, but also $50,000. The reason for that increase, it was contractually negotiated with the union, where we were able to get more EMTs in the department paid a stipend. Many times EMTs eventually stop working on the ambulance, but they still function in roles on the apparatus, such as the engine or the squad, and they use those skills. So we contractually negotiated them to have a stipend to be able to perform the skills needed as an EMT. And the only other two items that I was asking for more money on, which is the training costs, which is up here. It was basically a total of $32,000. $22,000 of that training money is to go to, basically, we could hire people back, members of the department back, so we could have uninterrupted training sessions. Many times, as I said, we have training sessions where people are constantly being called in and out. But we would like to train as a group. We have 4 groups on the department. So if we were able to hire individuals back, we could take the on-duty crew and actually go out and train for the day 4 times a year, which is something we're not currently able to do. So that's why I'm asking for that $22,000. And another $10,000 is for the offices of the department. All the offices, except for myself and the deputy chief, work on the individual 4 crews. With that, we are not able to all train together as a group of officers. I'd like to professionally develop these individuals and have us work together. So with the $10,000, I would like to have 4 officer meetings a year where we offer professional development to the group of us. This is just an organizational chart, as I mentioned. I'm seeking a second deputy chief's position. But if you look at the top on here, I am one of only 2 non-union positions on the department. And you can see that the department is very bottom heavy here. I almost look at it as a safety issue where we have what's called span of control, where we should be in charge of only a certain number of people, where myself and the deputy chief are basically in charge of the whole department. We have a total of 60 members between the 4 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have a few other staff positions on the side. So what I would like to do is change that organizational chart with that position to basically eliminate some of that span of control, develop the administrative aspects of the fire department. This way we have more individuals reporting to 2 deputy chiefs and then up to myself. Again, the $32,000 for the training, which I mentioned, enables the crews to train together uninterrupted, and also for the multiple officers meetings. Going into projects that I'm asking for in the capital budget, I'm looking for a new squad truck. This currently is what we call our little squad. It's Squad 3. It is used. It's roughly 12 years old and has 50,000 miles on it. And you can see that it's really starting to become dilapidated. Unfortunately, this truck was tasked with too many parts of the fire department. It should really only be responding to any type of brush fires, maybe a dumpster fire, a trash fire in town. But this also runs with the ambulances to provide more manpower when the ambulances need that. And the truck also serves in plowing the parking lot of the department. So it has those 3 different tasks, but really should only have 1. So I'm looking to replace this. As I said, 12-year-old vehicle, 50,000 miles on it, and tasked with different items that really shouldn't be. This is what I'm seeking. This is, the acronym is a BRAC, but it's basically a brush truck. I think by separating, having a separate brush truck, and then also something I'm going to mention, which is called a MAR, I think that I can make this vehicle last much longer than the 10, 12 years the current squad has lasted. I'd like to see this last probably about 20, 25 years because it just will not be used for all the different things that the little squad is currently being used for. So I think I can save the town money by doing that, by separating the tasks of the vehicle. I can make the vehicles last longer. We are asking for $200,000 for this vehicle. I don't expect to pay that much, but we do want to make sure that we have the necessary equipment to go on it, not just the vehicle. And the reason why I bring that up is we currently are designing a new engine which town meeting had appropriated $650,000 for. We found that the price tag came in around $638 just for the engine itself, which has really left us short to purchase equipment like hose, jaws of life, couplings, anything else that we need on that vehicle. So that's why I'm asking for the amount I am, and that way we'll be able to get all the necessary equipment without having to worrying about what we don't really have enough for the future. This is the other vehicle that I was speaking about. It's called the MARV, the Medical Assist Response Vehicle. And this is part of my plan to separate the tasks of the small squad. The point of this vehicle would be to basically chase the two ambulances. Anytime that we get called for a advanced life support call, we have to send more than just 2 paramedics on it. It could be a cardiac call, it could be a respiratory call, anything of that nature. You just can't appropriately treat people when you only have 2 individuals. You need other people to help start IVs, carry bags, that may assist with intubation, things of that nature, never mind actually carrying the patient out on the stretcher. So having 2 people just is not enough to handle many of the calls that we go on. So again, I'm looking to separate the tasks of the small squad, and this ambulance would then just be relegated to chasing the ambulances around town. Another thing that I would like to do with it is that if we had some type of mass casualty incident, we'd like to be able to stock a lot of different equipment in this vehicle, things like backboards, any type of emergency medical service supplies that we don't carry on the ambulance. That if we did have a type of incident that required medical treatment of many people, we would have a lot of this extra equipment on the MARV itself. Again, dedicated to assist on EMS runs. I mentioned the manpower and extra equipment, and hopefully would prevent the early degradation of the small squad or the brush truck. This is our boat. We do have some ponds here in town, New Pond or Willow Pond. We also have Ellis and then the Ponset River going through town. So we have to be adequately trained and prepared for any type of water rescue. This boat is a rubber Zodiac boat. It's 15 years old. Most rubber boats, the estimated lifespan on them are 10 to 15 years, so we're at the maximum for this boat. In the pictures I provided, you can't see it, but the underside of the boat was actually starting to delaminate from the boat. We were able to repair it with some glue, but I don't feel comfortable sending my people out on the boat in a rescue situation, knowing that that could start to delaminate again and then actually sink. So it's another view of the boat. And you can see it's well worn, and it's the 15 years that we've had it. I am asking for $20,000 for this boat. That will replace the boat, the engine, and any of the other necessary equipment that goes along with that. I do mention 2 of the suits that we use with the boat are called Mustang Gumpy suits. Those are used for different types of weather. They protect us if we have to go into the water to rescue somebody. And those suits are also part of the price tag to replace all of those. We can't just replace a couple suits when we have many members of the department. Some are big like me, some of them are small. So we actually have to buy 2 of each size, small, medium, large, extra large, and then we have a couple big, huge guys that are even bigger than that. But that way, if we have an incident, we were able to match 2 suits with those people to get them on the boat and out. And that's basically it. If anyone has any questions.
And I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but could you give us a feel for, of those rescues, sort of what's the distribution of types of rescues?
You mean the EMS
Yeah.
response? I can't give you the specific numbers. I can get that for town meeting, but I could say roughly they're half and half advanced life support to basic life support. I don't know if that answers your question.
I mean, everything from a broken leg to delivering a baby.
So, the dispatchers try to appropriately send the correct truck. If we have someone who's in labor, we're going to send the advanced life support truck, the paramedics, or any cardiac call, respiratory call, things of that nature. But if someone calls and says, little Jimmy got hit by a baseball in the arm playing Little League, we're going to send the basic life support with the ambulances. But we are hoping to go to 2 ALS ambulances. Every other surrounding community, Walpole just went, but all the other surrounding communities are running 2 ALS ambulances. Yes, ma'am?
Who's going to plow the parking lot?
I was hoping we could get Mr. Ryan to start taking it. I think he already does, kind of, but we do have our mechanic come in and plow the parking lot also. So.
Is there any trade-in value to those trucks, like to a small, volunteer fire department in this?
There could be. It would be minimal. My thought process was with the small squad, even though it's requiring more care, is that if I did get the second deputy chief's position, which is very important to me, that would be a vehicle for that individual. That way, when we have any type of incidents, and a chief officer like myself or the current deputy chief has to respond, they would have that vehicle.
I believe we gave a fire truck to Chile about 10 years ago.
We did.
It was a ladder truck.
4 years ago.
Yes, sir?
What vehicle do you send now if you have 2 ambulance situations at one time?
We'll always send one of the apparatus if they're already out on other calls. It could be the engine, usually it'd be the front engine or what we call the hydrant piece, possibly the ladder, and then we'll contact, depending on the location of the incident, the medical call, we'll contact mutual aid, whatever town is closest to that.
Is it more money to send a piece of apparatus to that site rather than send the...
Other than wear and tear on the vehicle, I can't say that it costs more money. The one thing is that we won't recoup our costs if we send the engine,
Right.
because we don't have an ambulance where we're actually making the money and transporting the patient. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you could go over a bit of the details about BLS, ALS, and paramedic. I know there are 3 levels of certification. You mentioned 2 types of calls and 2 types of ambulances. So do you have people certified in paramedic, and how do you use them in the staffing of the ambulance?
We do. So we have a total right now of 36 EMTs. EMT covers all levels, as you're saying. We have 16 paramedics that work on the paramedic truck, and I also have 10 paramedics that are working at the basic level. We're hoping to get them up in that second ALS ambulance running so they can use their skills. We have 20 basic EMTs that currently ride the BLS ambulance, and then we have multiple EMTs that have gotten off the ambulance through seniority and attrition, but they're working on the apparatus, so when an engine does respond, if we don't have an ambulance available, they're able to treat the people at home appropriately. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was involved in several of the resource studies in fire departments when I was in charge of statistics at NFPA. And having that high a percentage of your EMTs being certified paramedic, that's unusually good as departments around the country.
Yes. To me personally, the most important thing with having as many paramedics as possible is you're treating any patient at a higher level. Basically, I can equate it to paramedics are like bringing the emergency room to the patient. I'm not knocking basic EMTs. I was a basic EMT, but they can only perform basic skills. whether it's CPR, bandaging, a few other things that are a little more advanced. But to be able to bring that emergency room with the paramedics to the patient is a much more important ideal to me.
In terms of the response rate, the volume, has this volume been consistent with what we've seen in the town the last few years, higher, lower?
It's increased. When I first got on the department 30 years ago, we did roughly 3,000 runs total. So we're at 5,700 roughly now. I fully expect that to increase with all the complexes that we're building in town and plan on building more. So I only see our run numbers as going up. I don't see them at all decreasing. Yes,
I
sir.
have a logistical question,
Sure.
which is, seeing that you're going to be asking for a second deputy chief
Yes.
and a EMS command vehicle, however you want to refer to it, a support, and another squad, a bigger squad, do we have the logistical space to support 1, 2, 3 more apparatus?
Yes, actually, what I was going to do was we have what's called an SRS, Special Response, and that vehicle was going to be moved outside. I was going to have the new brush truck and the Marv in those two bays, but you are correct, actually, at that point we are running out of space. That was one of the benefits of taking the small squad. Instead of actually reselling it as a used vehicle and giving it to the second deputy chief, that now takes that vehicle away from having to park within the building. It'll go with the deputy chief to wherever their home is and then park out front during the day shift.
Okay.
But we are running out of space there.
And my pet one is the boat. As you already know,
Yes.
in the 15 years that we've had this boat, how many times have we gone out for a response, non-training?
I could look that number up exactly for you over 15 years. It's just to me personally, and as we talked about as SPART at the last meeting, I'm not willing to take that risk. Any person who lives in Norwood or is visiting Norwood, whether it's an adult or a child, is swimming in one of the bodies of water of this town, I want to be able to rescue them if they get into trouble. And I am not going to put a price tag on that. I'm not. But what I think is short money for that boat to make sure that we're appropriately trained and ready to rescue someone in that situation, I think it's well worth it. And I would never want to risk that.
Okay.
Further questions for Chief Maurice before we bring up Mark Ryan? All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have Mr. Ryan's presentation. So in just a moment, Mark Ryan, DPW Director and Town Engineer, will be going through the DPW budget as well as the airport budget as he's the chairman of the airport commission. We want to take a 2-minute quick bathroom break, or does everyone want to keep going through? They'll keep going. I'm going to do a bathroom break. Mark, it's all you.
You come back, it'll be over.
That's the goal.
Stop fast.
Just blame me while I'm out of the room for everything.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Ryan, the Director of Public Works and Town Engineer. I've been Director of Public Works and Town Engineer combined since February of 2009. Prior to that, I was Town Engineer, and so I've been here with the town for 20 years, and welcome the newcomers, and nice to see some familiar faces are here at town meeting. I'm here to talk about Public Works first, and then as Tony Rizzuto said, the airport. So if you look at your book, we have multiple pages in this. I'm going to move along pretty quickly here. I don't want to keep you here too long. But Public Works, 401, we have a salaries, and that basically takes care of the 5 managers and oversee the 37 union employees
And then the 10 summer help employees that come in do a great job for us, helping us on many tasks around town. The total budget is $3.2 million for labor salaries, and that's an increase of $109,000. And that's contractual. That's you were talking about COLA earlier. Those are all step raises for 42 of those people. All right, the 10 summer help, they don't get step raises, but that's for the 42 people there. Operating expenses, this is for building utilities, gas, water, electricity, broadband, equipment repair. Okay, this is all the equipment that we have to repair throughout the year. Fuel for the vehicles, we got to fuel all the vehicles we use, plus all the equipment. That total budget is $439,000. There's a $3,200 decrease there. Engineering department, like I said, I'm town engineer. We have 2 engineers in the engineering department, along with myself. I go back between engineering and public works. Plus there's funding for one part-time employee who works 12 hours a week. That person has been here as long as Bernie Cooper, which is 30 plus years, Bernie.
He's a newcomer.
He's a newcomer. And then we have a funding for a summer intern. We get someone each year that helps for a lot of surveying we do, a lot of projects that we do, scanning, inspection, very valuable. And there's an increase there, a little over $9,400. And once again, those are for step raises, that's contractual. Operating expenses, we have office supplies, training, geographical information system. Mr. Zuko has come on board and has really been spearheading a lot of upgrades in our technical IT department. Engineering has been a lot of paper maps, paper plans. We're going to a more digital age. That's what the GIS system is for. So that total budget is $19,000 in engineering operating expenses. That is level funded. The engineering department, like I said, maintain tax maps, cemetery records, maintain the GIS. They advise the selectmen, planning board, board of appeals, conservation commission, the general manager on various projects. We inspect construction projects. We advise property owners. A lot of people come in, want to know how to get things done around their house. We also develop plans and specs. We try to do as much as we can in-house, specifically roadway and utility projects. Highway maintenance. All right, these are the, you're going to see a lot of text up here, and then I'm going to show you a lot of pictures of what we do out there. Highway maintenance, pavement markings, asphalt work, crack sealing, trees, pesticide applications, materials and equipment. You see the total budget there, $328,000. There's a decrease there of $12,000. Capital expense, each year we try to do sidewalks over. There's money in there for that. Chapter 90 funds. Chapter 90 is what we use, we get from the state. About $860,000 is the value this year. That's what we use for roadway resurfacing. So in addition to what we get from the state, we supplement that with some of our own funds. This year it's $100,000. That total budget this year is $125,000. There's a decrease of $265,000. Hopefully that goes up. We'll see how things go, but the town's been good the last couple of years supplementing Chapter 90 to take care of our roads. We're really falling far behind our roadway projects, and we got to keep funding that.
Do you have any data on what the length of the queue for projects is? I'm thinking of being able to say we've got X number of miles of highest priority roads, and at the rate we're spending, we would get to then the average road every 5 years, every 2 years, every 20 years. Same thing for the sidewalks. Any of that sort of context planning data?
So right now, so this year we're going to spend about $950,000 on roadway resurfacing. The 110 miles of road that we have in town, if you want to pave them, 20 to 25 years, we should be spending right now $1.6 million. If we were starting from,
And
you know,
that would get to a 20 to 25.
right. And that's what you recommend. But to really do that, we'd have to do it probably 5 years and 4 or 5 million to catch up, to start getting into that queue you're talking about, where we can, you know, keep spending $1.6 million a year to make sure we're getting roads done 20 to 25 years. So we're so far behind, and we're falling behind each year.
How does that compare with other towns? I imagine everybody's struggling to find enough in the budget to keep up where they want to be on infrastructure maintenance.
So Braintree, for example, spends about $2.7 million a year on their roads, so they do about double their Chapter 90 allocation. So we're better than some, but not near, not where we'd like to be. It all depends on the town and their Chapter 90 allocation, what their road money is, what their own budget is. One of the things that we do that we don't do that some towns do is we don't spend our Chapter 90 money on road equipment. You are able to spend Chapter 90 money on road equipment. We historically have not done that. We put that into paving, where some towns are spending sometimes a third or half of their Chapter 90 money on road equipment, bridges, and you can even do some trails work and other things with Chapter 90 money. We focus all of ours on paving to try to keep the roads up and running.
So the highway department, I mean, you've all seen them around town. You know, they're building sidewalks. This is Aaron Guy Park. Froggies, I mean, everyone knows Froggies is there in the winter, and it's a great asset. Highway Parks maintains that. Leaf bag pickup, you know, from April through November into December, you know, curbside leaf bag pickup. Not many communities do that. Tree brush removal, that's a given, either a fallen limb or a tree, or just maintaining the roadway. We construct things, all right? We're not just maintaining things, we're constructing. This was a pocket park we built a couple of years ago adjacent to Town Hall. We have a signage department. They're out there putting up street signs, be it street names, stop signs. A lot of them get hit, and they have to be repaired, or new ones are approved by the selectmen, or we come up with some other ideas to try to improve the environment for everyone, be it pedestrian vehicles or bicycles. Trash and recycling, this is separate from the refuse. You know, we have people out there emptying the trash and recycling barrels at the athletic fields, you know, through Norwood Center and a lot of the common. And we can just go through here, you know, 434 streets we got to maintain, 110 miles. Pavement, street sweeping, leaf bag pickup, I mentioned, set up and break down the voting booths, and then set up and clean up for community events. This is just highway parks department alone. Norwood Day, 4th of July parade, charity car washes, road races, fishing derby, Memorial Day, touch a truck, trunk or treat. I mean, highway and parks department very busy. Snow and ice removal, thank goodness we're out of that until another year. Salaries, snow and ice department, $150,000. That's overtime for the DPW employees working overtime during snow and ice season, just on snow and ice. We have operating expenses to buy rock salt and liquid salt, equipment repair, hiring contractors, storm damage, $525,000 on the operating expense, that's level funded. $50,000 increase on the DPW overtime for the DPW personnel. We're trying to get snow and ice up to a level that's average, and we're getting close to that. This year it's $675,000 total. Last year was $625,000. You've seen us around town widening the roads, the sidewalks, snow removal. Public Works gets very involved. A lot of us think it was a mild winter, and it was for the most part. But salt and plow 434 streets, 31 miles of sidewalks are plowed, rock salt and liquid salt, there's a cost to that. 2018, 2019, the season we just had, 21 salt operations, 7 plow operations, 2 snow removal operations. We actually had 44 inches of snow, which is historically average. Of course, we got 22 inches of that in 7 days in March. So we're looking pretty good until March came along. Waste collection and disposal, this is the operating expense for solid waste and trash. Solid waste, and recycling collection, disposal, white goods, bulk items, collection and disposal, testing of the groundwater at the landfill. The landfill has to be monitored each year by our consultant and reported to DEP. Contractor work, for brush chipping and the screening of the leaf compost up there. Total budget's $1.9 million. Most of that is contractual with Waste Management. Each year, the contract, and going into the second year, 5-year contract, 2.5% increase. Trash and recycling, single stream, we started in October of 2008. Clean, neat, recycling percentages went from 14% to 30%. We maintained the Winter Street Recycling Facility open every Saturday, other than the 2 hazardous waste days, for the disposal of many items, recycled items. In fact, we just started a food scrap drop-off program. I encourage anyone to look on the DPW website for information, and we actually provide items that can help you do that at a reduced cost. Trash, 6,000 tons a year. Recycling, 2,590 tons a year. Trash and recycling, the way things are going now, is about the same cost. That's where we're at. Some people, they say, why don't we just throw everything in the trash? It's the right thing to do to recycle. Winter Street Recycling, I told you, open every Saturday. We actually get 700 to 1,000 visitors every Saturday, depending on the season. Dispose of leaves, grass, brush, single stream recycling, bulk items, mattresses, styrofoam, mercury products, you name it. Plus, we have to monitor the landfill, how it's really involved with the environment by testing the groundwater. Sewage, we have a sewer division. Okay, we're looking out there for sewage infiltration and inflow into our sewer system. We just want whatever we put down the sink or the toilet into the sewer system. There's a lot of old system here. We get inflows and infiltration. We're trying to reduce that number. Sewer leak detection, contract work, sewer pump station maintenance, and materials. Total budget $102,000, level funded, and this is all recovered by rates. We get our sewer and water bill, this is recovered. You see the personnel out there fixing manholes. Sewer line, we're doing a lot of sewer line work. We've got 122 miles of sewer mains. We've lined about 7.5 miles of sewer mains to protect the Meadowbrook from contamination. We do video inspection of the sewer and drain lines. This is a sewer line that you can see the roots getting into it. And this is what happens after we can get that sewer line actually lined. We get a liner in there, and you don't have that infiltration of water, you don't have the roots going in there clogging up the sewer. Maintain 122 miles of sewer, 2,200 sewer manholes, 3 pump stations. Last year, 134 house sewer services backed up. People call DPW. We show up and take care of it. Unclogged 31 sewer mains. We repaired 7 building sewer services. And our average daily flow into the MWRA system is 5.6 million gallons a day of sewer. Drain maintenance, another division. Contract work, materials, removal of waste. The waste is what we take out of the catch basins. Total budget $40,900, that is level funded. You see the personnel out there cleaning the catch basins. Last year we cleaned 1,200 catch basins. Drain line repair, we repair lines, we install lines, very versatile group. Repairing catch basins, we got an old infrastructure. There's a lot of these catch basins between age and the salt we have to put down to keep the road safe, deteriorate the catch basins, so there's a lot of rebuild going there. Drain divisions, 95 miles of drains, 1,675 drain manholes, 2,505 catch basins. Video inspect and repair, install drain lines and structures. Water distribution, another item that is covered through rates, but the operating expense, materials, meters, leak detection. the AMR, the automated meter reading system, utilities, cross-connection. Cross-connection protects the public water supply from contamination from industries. Miscellaneous fees, permits, and safety training. Total budget, $400,000, is a decrease there of $6,000. Where's the water come from? MWRA. Comes in along Route 1 near the McDonald's there by University Ave. Those are our water tanks. We've got 2 water tanks up there, 4.5 million gallons. They provide the storage and they provide the pressure to serve the town. Water department installs water mains, fixed leaks, and there's our summer help. These kids do a great job out there maintaining our hydrants. Summer help is fantastic. They're going to be coming in a couple of weeks, but they're making them all look good, and we're giving them a service, making them work, having them work. Cleaning and lining. Over 4,000 feet of water main work cleaned and lined. To the right, that's a water main that's cast iron, doesn't have a liner in it. And that's the percolation that builds up on it. It's not harmful, but it does produce that rust you might see sometimes when you see a hydrant being flushed or changes in flow, and you might turn your faucet on and it gets a little cloudy or reddish. Cleaning and lining to the left, that's the end product there. Water division, 119 miles of water pipe, 972 fire hydrants, valve chambers, water tanks, leak detection. Last year, 41 water service leaks we repaired, 17 water main leaks we repaired, replaced 39 iron water services. As I said, over 4,000 feet of water main, clean and lined. Average daily flow, 2.7 million gallons a day. And if you ever looked at a graph, our water usage has gone down over the years. And this started years ago with leak detection, water saving units, and people just being mindful of conserving water. Cemetery department, we have 2 cemeteries. There's funding for 11 employees there. We have 1 manager up there, 6 union employees, and then we have 4 summer help come along. Total budget of $502,000, increase of almost $20,000, and once again, that's contractual. Operating expense, total budget $123,000. There's a decrease there of $65,000. That's for utilities, materials, equipment repairs, burial liners that we resell and make we make a profit. The town does make a profit on that, but we save the consumer quite a bit over what a funeral home would charge. Gas and oil for vehicles and tree care. Capital expenses, site improvements, shrubs, trees, anything of that nature. And new equipment, we are getting a new mower this year. So there's a decrease of $74,000 over last year. Island Cemetery up on Winter Street. That's the main cemetery, the operational cemetery. We have 2 cemeteries. Old Parish Cemetery up Washington Street in Railroad Ave. The mowing and trimming of 2 cemeteries. This crew is responsible for maintaining the grounds. Always trying to look nice and inviting. Plantings, especially 6 weeks we have Memorial Day, our biggest time of the year. Veteran section, always a sacred place and always maintained well. 2 cemeteries, 41 acres total, 290 tournaments a year. Plant flowers, shrubs, snow plowing. It's amazing what that crew does up there for all the work they have. Park maintenance, this is
On the cemeteries, how many more years at that rate will you have room to receive additional returns?
we're about 40 years right now. But that's with some expansion along Bellevue Ave at 40 years. There's quite a bit of property on Bellevue Ave there that is included in that 40 years.
Say something like an odd question, but somebody was just talking to me about it last time, about the whole concept of tree planting or whatever, where people give their bodies for fertilizer, basically. There's a couple of cemeteries that do that. Has the board ever considered that?
So some cemeteries have scatter areas. They maintain maintain. There's a wooded area and we'll scatter in there. We haven't got to that point.
Scattering of the ashes or?
Yes.
Okay, what about the actual body?
Oh, I'm sorry, so
Yeah, that's what, I've not heard of it, I was just told that was
I
last
think
night.
there's people who are able to sort of combine rashes with like a tree root that you planted
Is that what
somewhere.
it is? Okay, I didn't know what it was.
There was a thing in the globe about actually composting human body.
Yeah, I guess that's what it was,
Yeah,
yeah.
if it's an actual body, I don't think that's happening in Massachusetts.
It's doing it somewhere, because I saw something about it in the globe.
I would think there'd be health laws.
Well, there's a key line in it, and things.
It doesn't happen outdoors, it happens in a closed facility over many, many years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it wouldn't happen in the cemetery.
Okay, but then you can then get the compost out.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Does that include the bones too?
Yeah, everything actually.
Massachusetts has pretty strict burial regulation for actual bodies. In that 40-year figure, societal changes, more people are actually getting cremated, so that period of time might actually extend beyond 40 years as more and more people get cremated, less people want to be buried.
yeah, we're at about 25-30% cremation now.
What was it maybe 15 years ago?
10. It's increased quite a bit, absolutely. Lastly, park maintenance. This is maintaining our town commons and our athletic fields. Operating expense takes care of materials, be it the loom, the seed, fertilizers, contract work. We do share some of the maintenance. We hire a contractor to help us. Years ago, when we decided to do all our ball fields over, rather than hire employees, we do have some local landscapers cut the grass for some of the fields for us. And then miscellaneous equipment repairs and utilities, $180,000. That's level funded. And that's, mowing athletic fields. Norwood has some really great athletic fields. We put a lot of effort, the town has, starting in 2002 with a master plan, and we follow through with it. The town has maintained these. This is a Willard ball field, beautiful field down at the Willard School. Doherty Playground Hardcore we just built last year, and that was really managed by the Public Works Department. Some of the work was done by Public Works and is maintained. Decorations around town, that's what Parks Department does. They're decorating the traffic islands, some of the medians, and a lot of the parks. Through Norwood Center, putting up the decorations, in this case, for the winter. Now we have the banners that are up for the springtime, so it's quite a bit of work. We maintain 24 athletic fields, 53 acres of land. Maintain various park commons, Town Common, Arundel Park, DAV, Shattuck Park, Bond Street Park, Paws Pool Complex, as well as the 9 playground tot lot areas. Like I said, landscaping, median strips, traffic islands, holiday lighting, and town hall. Thank you for listening, and I will answer any questions.
What percentage of your budget is self-funded through rates and fees that you collect?
So water and sewer is collected, that's fully recovered. Okay. As far as park maintenance, there is a athletic field use fee that the recreation department collects. So I would suspect a 20% is recovered. I never really checked the numbers, but just knowing how much we pay out and what is collected, about 20%.
And what other thing I noticed that our budget for street lighting's gone down tremendously in the coming year. Is that due to the implementation of more environmentally friendly, like LED lights?
Yep, the light departments cover the whole town in LED street lights, so that was we did most of the project. We saw a large benefit last year, and then it was concluded this year, so next year's budget, we're going to see another drop. So it's just going to LED street lights.
Can that be, in that same model be applied to the building facilities, reduce the lighting and operating costs within our town buildings?
Absolutely. I mean, the street lighting cost is enormous, so obviously that's where you see a huge benefit. But I think we have 2 LED lighting projects in the capital plan for next year. It's either next year, between this year and next year, the library and the police department are getting done. They're sort of 2 of our last facilities that we want to bring up to speed with LED lights.
The specific issue of trees encroaching on power lines. Are you and the light department both involved in spotting something that needs to be addressed and then addressing it?
Yeah, so the light department does a great job of maintaining the trees around the power lines. And that's,
Well, they maintain those trees.
they do, and that's why there's very few power outages in this town, because they do such a great job of making sure those trees aren't encroaching on it. On our side, if we're gonna plant a tree, we wanna try to plant a tree that's not gonna go up that high. So we try to do work on that end, but they do a great job of making sure they're not encroaching on the power lines.
Well, snow and ice removal budget, if we were to increase the snow and ice removal budget, the way I see it, that would solve two problems. One, it would give us a safety net for the winter, and if we don't use it, that increases our free cash number. Am I missing something on that?
No, you're absolutely right. That's one of the areas where we're constantly depleting our free cash every year, is to offset our snow and ice deficit. When we overspend on snow and ice, the money has to come from somewhere. It's coming out of free cash. And what we're doing is, and many communities do it, but we know we're nowhere near the average snow and ice season. I mean, we're averaging $1 million a year in snow and ice costs. We're budgeting $650,000, $675,000, so we're not even getting close to an average year. So it's just constantly pulling money out of the free cash. What it is we just let it go for a while, and now we've got to try to bump that up to where it's a more historic average. You're going to go over some years. You're going to have bad winters. But the other two things that are happening, in addition to what's draining our free cash, is we like to do snow removal downtown. It's beneficial to the businesses. It helps people get out, helps people walk in the streets. When we want to do overnight snow removal and have contractors do it, it's about $80,000 a pop. So we can't do that every single time it happens. Not that we necessarily need to, but it gets to that point where there's a lot of snow downtown. It impacts the businesses, it impacts the walkability of the community. The staff can get to it over time, but sometimes it takes 5 or 7 days before they can get to it. We'd like to be a little bit more friendly in being able to get that done in a shorter time period. But what happens is that first big storm is earlier in the year. Great, we can probably take care of it. It comes towards the end of the year, and we're sitting there counting how many days until it gets warm and saying, well, you know, we got our first snow, but it'll be warm in a couple weeks, just let it melt, and we're not going to do anything. But that's not a great level of service. And the big issue is not just the impact on the businesses downtown, but the accessibility of the downtown as well.
All the stuff that goes to the recycling center up there on Industry, is that, do we pay for that to get removed? Do we make money on any of the scrap metals or anything that's recycled?
We do make money on the metals. It's not a lot. It's a market system, so we do make money. We get a return on that. Things like styrofoam we pay for. It's not a big price. Bulk items is probably the most costly of the items up there. People bringing up their furniture and things like that. Mattresses are starting to become very expensive to get rid of. We were fortunate for a couple of years to have a grant where we didn't have to pay for it. That grant has run out. So it's a cost to us, absolutely. It's a convenience for a lot of people.
What about the clothing and things like that? Is that donated or do you sell it or what?
Yep, so the clothing, we have textile, Bay State Textiles is up there, plus 9 other places in town. And since 2014, we've recycled almost 400,000 pounds of textiles. And it's been a net gain to the town, about $57,000.
So the ones at the schools are part of that also?
Yeah, so everything that goes into Bay State Textiles, trailers, either at the schools, at DPW, landfill, those funds go back to the schools.
Okay, oh, I see, it goes back to the schools. What about the pink bags that get left with the recycling? Does that go to the town then?
That goes to the town.
So we have to decide if I want to.
Well, when we first started the feedback program, we told the schools that we would give them the check for it if they wanted it, because the goal is not to take any textiles worth in there. We save money by people recycling their textiles. We're not making, I don't think we're really making that much off the feedback program. It's not really taken off yet, but they want the $87 check a year. We will absolutely give them the $87 check a year. We're just...
You just said
Yeah, people, because they give their textiles to a lot of different places, the program, the pink bag program hasn't really taken off yet. But it's not, we're not looking to generate money by the sale price of the stuff in the pink bags. It's that it's coming out of the waste streams where we save the money. So that's what our goal is. We're not terribly concerned about where the check goes.
Yeah, the pink bags is generating some, but the Bay State textile dumpsters are drop-off sites. They get a lot of volume there, so that's what we're really making it.
Oh, but those aren't the ones at the schools then?
They're at the
Well,
schools.
they are at the schools.
Yep.
So then that would be more than $87. Yeah. Because you said it was 15.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I have a question just about the budget overall. So I see in your budget that, there are some decreases in your budget in terms of roads and stuff. If we do not find some way to increase revenue, whether that's through some sort of operational override or through growth or whatever, what do you see the long-term impact on your budget being over the next 3 to 5 years without any additional funds?
Reduction in services. We'll all feel that. Start not seeing the landfill open. We won't have summer help. We won't have curbside pickup of leaves. Maybe there's a trash fee, I don't know. There's a lot of reduction in services.
The DPW is probably one of the best examples of where you may not see that in 1 year, but over time, when you start losing one service after another, after another, after another, it's really going to impact how the community looks and how it functions. And again, you may think, oh, what do we need summer help for? But then really the downtown and some of the other areas of the town will really start to look pretty rough after a couple of years. And then you say, gee, why does the town look like crap? Well, that's what you're having your summer help do. I mean, it's not as much, even though we sort of refer to it as a jobs program, it's really not. They're just additional help to get things done. The cemeteries too, I mean, there's 4 students in the cemeteries. That's the first thing you're going to cut. You're going to cut the 4 kids helping out in the cemeteries. Well, then we're going to get all sorts of calls that the cemeteries don't look good. But then what's next? So you're going to cut a cemetery position. Then you cut another cemetery position. And sometimes those things end up having that impact on your revenues as well. So you start doing all these things and the community won't look the same way down the road, which has an impact on not just property values, but how people perceive their own community, whether people are willing to invest here. In terms of the roads, we're keeping our head above water barely with using all of our Chapter 90 money, but the cost of roads is going up faster than we can pave them. My hometown of Randolph, if you take a drive through there, the roads are absolutely awful. So where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years without addressing it? Roads are just going to continue to get older and older and in worse shape. And really, you get into a phase where you're just fixing what's the absolute worst and what the bare minimum is. You don't want a residential subdivision or a street where the road goes 40 years without getting paved, but that's what ends up happening. And then you stop doing your crack sealing, which just deteriorates the road even faster, and it goes and it goes and it goes, and it's sort of a tumbleweed that builds.
Following up on that question, when you have your couple of sessions that are about the override, will you be talking about the multi-year, out-year impact of not passing?
We did at the November 29th session, and that'll come up again at the 2 subsequent sessions, that what are the things we're looking at. And we came very close to having to make some of these cuts this year. We considered closing the landfill this year. We considered closing Father Max this year. We've kind of skated by some of those, but over the next 5 years, what do? Do you cut down on your plow time, or do you close the landfill? If you close the landfill, I mean, it's a service we want to offer, but you have to cut somewhere. And at the end of the day, we don't have to do that. We don't have to operate pools. We do have to plow roads. So that's what happens is it comes into, you start doing only what you have to do. So the list over the next 5 years, there's quite a few things up there. And when we have to start hitting the highway staff, that's going to increase your plow routes. And that might just say, oh great, who cares if it's 4 hours or 6 hours before you get to the average plow route for a road. But if you have to get to work in the morning, you're going to want that plow there to be able to get you to work in the morning. I live less than a mile from town hall, so I might be able to deal with it, but if somebody's going to commute somewhere and the plows aren't out there, it makes it tough. The other reason we plow the roads that everyone often forgets, we like to talk about it so we can get to work and get to school, but we really plow them for emergency vehicles. So when you cull back that plow route time, instead of it being 3 or 4 hours, it becomes 5 to 6 hours, 6 to 7 hours, you're impacting emergency response as well.
I listen to this and I'm impressed, but I imagine if you had pictures of the roads at Randolph, if you had pictures of the snow before it's removed, something to make the future that we're choosing not to have or to have
A little more apparent.
seem real.
I can think of a couple of streets that are, they're growing soccer fields in between the streets and the sidewalks in other towns. I mean, but you're right, visual evidence is always one of the best selling points. Any other questions on the DPW budget before we go to the airport? Okay. Mark, you want to?
All right. So thank you. This is Norwood Memorial Airport. I'm the chairman of the Airport Commission. Russ McGuire, the airport manager, usually would take care of this, but he's away on training. The lucky dog is down in Florida. So anyways, Norwood Memorial Airport, located off Access Road. 1942, it was constructed to support the war effort. Basically, it was used in concert with Swan Air Base in Quincy to touch and goes for the Naval Air Squad to practice for the war effort. Since 1946, that's when the town took over the airport. The airport is operated as what's called the General Aviation Airport. And what the GA, General Aviation Airport is no scheduled airline service, no base military service. GA airports represent 87% of the nation's civil aircraft. There's 600,000 GA pilots logging 30 million flight hours annually. Only 300 of the nearly 5,000 plus airports in the United States schedule airline service, and these are like Logan Airport. The rest are GA. Other GA airports around here is Mansfield, Taunton, Lawrence, Beverly, Plymouth, Marshfield. Norwood Airport is around 680 acres, about 10% of the land mass of Norwood. We're open 24/7. The main runway is 4,000 feet long. There are 2 runways. The other runway is just a hair under 4,000 feet. Full lighting, all weather instrument capability. We're in a very nice location as far as Boston is considered. We're 12 air miles from Boston. We have about 60,000 operations a year. An operation is a landing is an operation and a takeoff is a landing. Based aircraft varies between 144 to 200 depending on the time of year. It includes jets, turboprops, helicopters, and piston airplanes. The annual operation is 60,000. Back in the 70s, it was closer to 200,000. It was more of a recreational facility. We have 12 businesses down there, corporate aviation, charters, fueling, electronic news gathering. We have Channel 25, Channel 5 operating out of there, personnel transport, instructional flying down there. Norfolk Mosquito Control works out of there in the spring, and then in the fall for spraying, sport flying, and weather reporting. Every time you get up in the morning, you see that weather forecast. Norwood seems always the coldest place around or the warmest place. Well, we're down the valley there, and that's the weather reporting station. Organizational chart, Airport Commission, 5 members, volunteers. We have the Airport Manager, Russ McGuire, Assistant Manager, Mark Raymond, Recording Secretary, and then occasionally we have an intern. So the Airport Manager, he oversees flight and ground operations. Badging, security's huge down there ever since 9/11. Flight risk management concerns, assists with accidents and incidents, wildlife control, that's a huge thing down there. Vehicle building and grounds maintenance, it's quite a bit for 2 personnel. We also identify facility needs, assist master planning, on-site support to tenants, assist with lease negotiations, accounts payable and receivable. Here we look at the budget requests, salaries. There's an increase this year, a little over $6,000. That's contractual for the 2 personnel. Operating expense, there is a reduction there, basically because some of the we have a new building coming online. We won't have rent to pay anymore, so that'll be a positive. Site improvements, capital expenses, there's quite a bit of reduction there, basically because we're not going to, we've moved one of the borrowing projects into the capital program. That's for a wildlife fence to replace. This just goes through all the reasons for all the decreases and some of the increases. Department heads, COLA increase, same with the full-time staff, overtime, historical average, some of the historical average for phone and data, capital construction, $90,000 was removed. As I mentioned, it's going to be put in a borrowing item. That's for a $1.8 million wildlife fence to protect the airport from incursions on the airport. We do pretty well down there getting money from the FAA and Mass DOT. And this just in this past year, fiscal 19. Total cost of projects here, $4.6 million. Those are capital projects. Out of that $4.6 million, town allocated $140,000 worth. So that's paying only 3%. So we're very fortunate that the FAA and Mass DOT put a lot of effort and money into the Novel Airport. Economic impact, they did another study recently, Mass DOT, of all the GA and the commercial airports. Town of Norwood generates $59 million in economic benefit to the state. 9,800 transient aircraft come to Norwood annually. That means people fly in because they want to use Norwood Airport to get wherever they're going. 23,000 visitors arrive by aircraft to come to Norwood. These people are going to retail outlets. They're going to the hotels and restaurants and the sport venues, namely Gillette Stadium up the road. And according to the economic impact statement, there are 467 direct and indirect jobs attributed to the airport, with a total payroll exceeding $19 million. With that, answer any questions?
I have two questions. One, what's the tax revenue of the businesses that are at the airport? And two, what's the market land value of the land that the airport sits on?
So, yeah, so, the Finance Commission did a nice in-depth study this past year, and counting everything in, legal expenses, health insurance costs and everything, town of Norwood makes there's a net earnings of about $51,000, and we anticipate that's going to be going up because this doesn't include landing fees, which we anticipate to be another $30,000. We just added that on in August. We've got a new building going to be coming on soon, so that's probably another $30,000 between rent payments and real estate taxes. So we're actually doing very well as far as net earnings there.
In terms of the value of the land, it's a little bit more complicated to answer because anytime you take an FAA grant, there's a 20-year timeline in that grant acceptance. So if we were to just try to sell the airport for land, there's 20 years worth of grants we either have to pay back or some would have to include the purchase price. The other side of that is, even though we own the airport, I believe the land was gifted to us to be used for aviation purposes. In theory, it may have to go back to the folks that gifted us to it in the 40s if it was no longer being used for aviation purposes. There's also a number of subleases and other leases of the land on the airport. The master lease is owned by, what are they called? BMA. So it's a complicated legal structure. And then add on to all of that, the fact that the FAA can really tell us what to do with our land, even though we wish we could tell them what to do with it. You could take a step back, and the community at some point should look at what do we want the future of the airport to be, but that's a 20-year outlook on where do we want it to be in 20 years. If we ever did want to operate an airport in town, that's possible, but we have to understand that that's a 20-year plan that's going to come with a lot of costs, and then we'd have to look at what we could use for the for the land use down the road, but it would be, at a minimum, you'd be looking at a 20-year outlook for something like that. So I'm sure there's a per acre value somewhere, but we couldn't just close it tomorrow and sell it next week even if we wanted to. And then we'd have to get our delegation involved because even if we wanted to do it and they were supportive of it, we'd then have to fight the FAA beyond all the grant assurances to tell them that we want to shut down the airport, which is, you can see by the amount of money that get put into small regional airports that don't even offer commercial service. The FAA doesn't like give up their landing strips.
Can you shed any brief light on the litigation speech that says what effect, if any, it has on all of these numbers and facts?
So the short answer is no. The medium answer is it wouldn't really have any impact on these numbers. And the long-term answer is that airports in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are incredibly litigious. There's probably 20 of them in the state, and at any given time, half of them are involved in lawsuits one way or another. It's just a unique industry with unique individuals. Pittsfield, North Adams, Mansfield, Chatham, they're all in lawsuits or just out of lawsuits. So it's unfortunately a litigious business line.
Are there any plans to expand the airport? I know you're talking about, people wanting salary for there, I don't know that's stuff, but I've heard people say things like, oh, they're going to expand it, the whole neighborhood, that, I'm just curious if that's
So,
paranoid.
on April 30th, we have a master plan update meeting at the Police and Fire Community Room to update our plans. There's really not much we can do as far as expansion of runways, because you've got 95 on one end and you have the golf course on the other. So in that master plan update, there's a what if you ever wanted to expand the runway from 4,000 to 5,000 feet. You have to buy a golf course, and that's highly unlikely for a lot of reasons, money and just community, not accepting expanding that runway. But it will be shown on the master plan update as it was back when it was approved in 2007. But the only expansion, if you call it expansion, is just upgrading the current facility the way it is now.
So going from 4,000 to 5,000, would what change the size of the airplanes that were able to land? Or
Nope, be the same aircraft that come in. Instead of leaving with a full tank, a half a tank of gas, they could leave with a full tank of gas. Be the same aircraft though. It would not change the
So it's full
specification.
tank of gas, and they need that extra footage to take off.
Right, if they want to go farther.
You just have smaller people here.
Or smaller.
Mark, we had any conversations about buying out that lease with PMA? It was 7.5 acres or something like that.
Yes, that's on, so we have a capital plan with the FAA, and that's on the 5-year plan to buy that lease out.
We eventually want to settle some of the lease and sublease issues at the airport and gain a little bit more control over the space. It's gotten a little complex over time. But then again, aviation law and managing an airport is a complex business line. Other questions on the airport or the DPW? Any other questions on any of the other budgets we covered this evening? All right, well, thank you all for coming tonight. We have Thursday night, we'll go over police department, light department, Board of Health, recreation, the library, and the senior center. And then next week we have the capital plan and then the school budget hearing. So thank you all for coming. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. And if you come up with any questions, feel free to let any of the department heads or myself or Bernie Cooper know if you have more questions about any of these topics. Thank you, everyone.